Welcome everyone. I call the April 17th City Council meeting to order. And as a reminder, we continue to have a remote aspect to our meetings. Both staff and members of the public may be participating in tonight's meeting remotely via WebEx. The first item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I welcome you to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a very nice sized crowd this evening and some very big items on our agenda. But I believe most people are here for our first item, which is special business. We are giving out some community environmental awards this evening. ID 1399 is the Ruth, Kees and Community Environmental Awards. I want to thank you all for coming tonight and sharing your gratitude and appreciation with some of our honorees prior to us starting the meeting. These are very, very special people in our community. Together, their hours, weeks, and years of service have enhanced, preserved, and protected our community's cherished environment. We have 3 awards we're giving out this evening, and so I'll move over to the podium and share a little bit of information, and I'll be inviting different council members to come up and help give out the awards. So tonight, to start with, we're giving out the Ruth Kees Award. The Ruth and Dan Kees Award is for a Sustainable Environment Champion. It is named after one of our community's tireless environmental advocates, Ruth Kees. She was a grassroots activist who, for more than 4 decades, advocated for the preservation of landmarks and natural areas. The Ruth and Dan Kees Awards honors those who have shown extraordinary leadership to protect our natural surroundings. Our winner this year is the embodiment of those very noble goals. I'm thrilled to recognize Robin Kelly as our 2023 Ruth and Dan Kees Award winner. For decades, Robin has been a dedicated environmental leader and an advocate for Issaquah's lands and waters, and a voice for the salmon that flow through our community's streams. Ms. Kelly currently serves as the executive director of the Friends of the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery, where she has spent over 6 years fostering key relationships at the city, the county, and the state level. This work has been key in furthering the mission of FISH while ensuring it is an educational and tourist hub now and into the future. Ms. Kelly is also the co-leader of the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce, was also the co-leader of the Issaquah Chamber of Commerce Festivals Office, where she's instrumental in helping the success of our beloved Issaquah Salmon Days Festival, which attracted thousands of visitors to Issaquah every year. Ms. Kelly has further championed environmental stewardship for all ages, leading efforts that range from early education with salmon camps to science fairs for high schools, and adult education through the training of docents to lead tours at the Issaquah Salmon Hatchery. A community icon in the truest sense, Robin's efforts have aided thousands of people in learning more about the salmon life cycle, the best ways to protect their journey, and the importance of salmon in our region. So thank you, Robin, for your decades of service, and I'd like to welcome Councilmember Martz up to help give out the award. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Councilmember Martz. So Robin's name will also be engraved on the Ruth and Dan Kees Award plaque that hangs on the wall in council chambers. And lastly, stay up with us, Councilmember Martz, we're gonna do a picture. Lastly, later this fall, we'll plant a tree in the Ruth and Dan Kees Grove of Trees at Squack Valley Park South in Robin's honor. So thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Martz. Councilmember Martz. Next, we will be presenting the Community Environmental Awards. Building upon the legacy of the Ruth Kees Awards, Issaquah also has a Community Environmental Award that recognizes outstanding achievements by individuals, groups, and organizations. In past years, the City of Issaquah has awarded one Community Environmental Award. But this year, in recognition of the incredible work being done in our community, we are awarding 2 Community Environmental Awards. It is my pleasure to award a Community Environment Award to Ann Newcomb for her work on environmental activism and her leadership protecting and preserving the natural environment of Issaquah. Please join me in congratulating Ann. I love it that you put your t-shirt on over your dress. Come on up and I got a few more nice things to say. Ann has been a leader in environmental activism in the community for many years. She truly embraces the mentality of think global, act local. Ann has been an advocate for the Issaquah Alps Trail Club and recently took on the position of board president. Ann has a deep personal commitment to mitigating climate change and creating tangible impact on the land of Issaquah Alps and is spearheading IATC's restoration events throughout the Issaquah Alps. Recently, Ann coordinated IATC's contingency to meet with our elected officials in Olympia for trust land transfer, a program that would allow the Washington State Department of Natural Resources to put more trust land into conservation status. In addition to all her incredible work with the Issaquah Alps Trail Club, Ann has been a forest steward for local spaces around Issaquah and has been an active member of the Issaquah Environmental Board since it started in just 2020. So I'd like to ask Council President Lindsay Walsh to come up and present the Community Environmental Award to Ann. Congratulations, Ann. Congratulations. Well deserved. Thank you, Council President. For our second Community Environmental Award, I'm thrilled to recognize John Smith for his work protecting and preserving our public spaces throughout the city. Please join me in recognizing John tonight. John has been leading Issaquah litter cleanup events on the first Saturday of every month since November 2021, resulting in over 15 events. Through online recruitment, these 1-hour monthly events attract up to 25 people each and have resulted in significant amounts of trash being removed from public spaces, such as sidewalks, trailheads, roadways, and along creek beds. John is building on the success of these cleanups by connecting with local schools to start litter awareness campaigns and to encourage youth to take part in litter cleanups. John's work is a reminder to our community that small actions and the work of dedicated community members can make a huge difference in protecting and enhancing our local environment. I'd like to invite Deputy Council President Zach Hall to come down and present our second community award to John. Thank you, John. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Council President. So just to close, I want to thank again the awardees, the Environmental Board, and all those in our community who are working, volunteering, and dedicating their time and efforts to protecting our environment and advancing sustainability throughout the city. If you are inspired today, we welcome your enthusiasm and encourage you to connect with the work of our awardees and the other amazing efforts in Issaquah. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you for joining us in this recognition. One last round of applause for our fabulous award winners. So we are going to take a 5-minute recess at this time because I'm not sure everybody wants to stay for the next 2 or 3 hours with us. So I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess and we'll let people say their congratulations and we'll get back to our regular business shortly. Thanks. Hello, everyone. We are back from our short break. The next item on our agenda this evening is ID 1357. This is the celebration and recognition of Administrative Professionals Day, and I'll be doing that through a proclamation. I'm going to move over to the podium and want to ask our wonderful Stephanie to join me, Director of Human Resources. So whereas Administrative Professionals Day is observed annually in workplaces around the world to recognize the important contributions of administrative support staff, and whereas administrative professionals play an essential role in coordinating the office and governmental functions, governmental operations of the City of Issaquah, and whereas administrative professionals are vital contributors in today's team-oriented work environment and are key frontline public relations ambassadors for their organizations. And whereas the work of administrative professionals today requires advanced knowledge and expertise in communications, computer software, office technology, project management, organization, customer service, and other vital office management responsibilities, and most importantly, have the willingness to learn and accept new challenges. Now, therefore, I, Mary Lou Pauley, Mayor of the City of Issaquah, do recognize April 26, 2023 as Administrative Professionals Day in the City of Issaquah, and I invite the community to join me in thanking the city's administrative professionals for their service and outstanding contributions. So Stephanie is joining me tonight. She is our Director of Human Resources, and I'll ask her if she'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. Well, I get the privilege this evening of standing in the gap for many directors in the city because we have administrative professionals in all of our departments. I had invited a few here tonight. I was hoping they could be here, but you know, the glue that they are in this organization, I have a feeling they are that same glue at home. And so these folks really have a servant's heart. When you read that list today, they really do keep us all organized and moving forward. So I'm really happy to accept this proclamation on their behalf. They do really great work for us.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda this evening is audience comments, and this is the time that members of the public can address council in person or virtually. So those who signed up in advance to make comments will be called on first, and if you are joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand or send the host a chat message. If you're on the phone, press *3. If you have joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. And if you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. There's also a public hearing this evening, which is an opportunity to speak as well, on AB 8398, Title 18 Land Use Code. If you are commenting on this item, please do it under the public hearing, which is occurring later in the meeting. City Clerk, has anyone signed up to speak for general audience comments or indicated a desire to speak this evening?
Yes, Mayor Pauley.
Thank you. If you are making comments tonight, please direct your comments to the whole council and not individuals. And while this is not a question and answer session, we will contact you to follow up if needed. When recognized, unmute your microphone for virtual attendees, or if you're in the room, just please step up to the lectern. State your name, address, and relationship to the city. Speak clearly and pause frequently, and limit your comments to 5 minutes. If you're attending virtually and do not respond after your name or phone number is called, or if your connection is lost unexpectedly, the meeting will need to proceed, and you are encouraged to rejoin this meeting if you are able to. Personal attacks, obscene language, and derogatory remarks, and disruptive behavior will not be permitted. Citizen comments, written and verbal, are an important aspect of the public process, and the city takes comments seriously. We thank you for taking the time to address us this evening. City Clerk, could you please identify the first person who signed up to speak?
Mayor Pauley, Paul Winterstein would like to address the council.
Well, hello, Paul.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, Council, Mayor Pauley, and staff, and even the clerks. I miss you all. My name is Paul Winterstein. I'm here this evening to introduce myself as the new Executive Director of Issaquah History Museums. which of course, we are in partnership with the city. The History Museums is the official kind of collector and maintainer of historical artifacts, and to run the two museums we have here in town, one at Gilman Town Hall and the other one at the train depot. And, you know, very grateful for the funding that we receive. And in fact, there's going to be some work this year done on Gilman Town Hall. And let me tell you, as a homeowner, and I started working there, yeah, it's got a backlog of unmet maintenance needs. So I'm really glad that you guys are stepping up to do that. There was, like a lot of nonprofits, the History Museums was highly impacted by COVID. And it's been, just like others as well, very difficult to build staff back up. We had an executive director and 4 people on staff. After COVID, we had 1 staff person left. And Karen Gaff, that staff person, did a heroic job, as did a number of the board members, to help just keep the operation going, one of which, Mark Lawrence, is here in the audience with this evening. Mark is our current board president, and past board president Emily Lee as well. Did some fantastic work to keep this organization going. Now that I'm on board, you know, I'm very excited to look at the prospect of getting some programs going again. You're very familiar with something called like the pub crawl, for example. A lot of people ask me about that. We all know that the trolley isn't running. That's going to take a little bit of a deeper dive to see if that's something we can do again. But those are some existing programs that I'm looking forward to. But also there's a big ask from the community to let's get the history out to the people. And I'm very excited to think about new ways. I know that the History Museums didn't have a presence at Salmon Days recently and some other events. And I hope we have a 4th of July celebration. Maybe we'll be at that as well. So getting those type of programs and bringing them out is very important. But there's also some very big items as well. We own a building that has a lot of artifacts in it, but it really isn't environmentally sound. And so that's a very big lift for this small organization to figure that out. And I'll be focusing on that as well. And so I just wanted to introduce myself, say thank you for the support we've gotten from both staff and the council over the years. You know, we look forward to bringing Issaquah's history to the people. There's a tremendous history here, and if I see you around and you're wondering, my favorite story I've learned about is the history of hops in the Issaquah Valley. And if you don't know about it, come see me. I'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. City Clerk, who else has signed up?
Mayor Pauly, no one else has signed up previously, and I see no virtual hands raised among our online attendees.
Thanks. I'll just check in the room again, too. I know we have a public hearing this evening. Many of you are probably here for the public hearing. If you are not and have general comments for the councilor, can you raise your hands so I can see? Okay, I do not believe we have anybody else for public comment. So I want to thank I was going to say Councilmember Winterstein. Woo, take me back. I want to thank Paul for coming back to the chambers and sharing an introduction of himself in his new role, as well as an update on the status of Issaquah History Museums. And for those who would like to make comments, you can always submit comments at any time to citycouncil@issaquahwa.gov. I'm going to turn it over to Council President Walsh and ask if there were any email comments that you received on any of tonight's agenda items.
Boy, howdy, we're there. We have 2 big items on our agenda tonight, AB 8398, the Title 18 public hearing. We received several comments from community members, local businesses, and industry groups with some kind of last comments and proposed revisions regarding the land use code updates. We appreciated hearing those. And then AB 8588, the Northwest Sammamish Road cross section. We had, I believe, 15 emails from community members in the last 24 hours expressing cross-section preferences with a strong preference for option A. That's in addition to the 600 survey responses we received months ago when the survey was held. So we have heard quite a lot from the community about those items. That concludes the reports.
Council President, did you want to make a comment about this portion of our meeting? Are we going to be continuing with this?
I was going to save that for go to the order.
Okay. Thanks very much. So the next item of business this evening is a consent calendar. And I do have a comment on one of tonight's consent calendar items. So there is a correction to Agenda Bill 8599, Connor Holmes fee in lieu of frontage improvements. on our current consent agenda. The financial section of AB 8599 incorrectly states that the total wall construction to mitigate against the potential for future landslides is estimated to be $900,000. This is incorrect. The total project cost is expected to be over $3.3 million, including design. The council's requested action tonight is to authorize the mayor to enter into and execute the fee in lieu of frontage improvement agreements in which Connor Homes will contribute $45,961 towards the part of the wall construction that is their responsibility. The city has procured a grant from FEMA, which provides the city with additional funding for the project. That is the only item of note that I had before, and committee chair remarks is the next section. None of tonight's consent calendar items were referred to committees, so I'm not thinking that there are any committee reports at this time, so just looking down the row. Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Oh, Councilmember Joe.
I just have a disclosure that Connor Homes is a member of my employer organization. I don't believe that voting yes or no on this particular item would have any bearing on my employment, but I just wanted to make sure that the public knew that before we voted on the consent agenda.
Thank you for that clarification, Councilmember Joe. The consent calendar was distributed to council in advance, and if authorized, the items on the consent calendar will be considered together and approved by one motion. Have the payables and payroll been reviewed?
They have.
They have.
You're giggling over there. Does any council member desire to remove any item from the consent calendar and consider it under regular business? And I am requesting a motion.
Yep, I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented. Is there any council discussion? Hearing none, the motion before the council is to approve the consent calendar as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries 7-0. The next item this evening on our agenda is the public hearing. AB 8398 is the Title 18 Land Use Code. This item was last before the City Council at the March 13th Committee of the Whole meeting, and I'd like to invite Community Planning and Development Director Minnie Dollywell to make a presentation. Welcome, Minnie.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. As you know, this has been in front of all different bodies multiple times, so today is a public hearing. I have a very, very short presentation here, which I'm going to try and launch. Let's see. So the purpose tonight is really to conduct the public hearing, and we are requesting that council consider adoption of the proposed ordinances at your May 1st meeting. Little bit of background for those of you that joined late in the game from members of the community generally. The city's Title 18 Land Use Code is being updated, and these are some of the larger umbrella goals to align it with the city's adopted plans, to allow for public engagement, improve efficiency, address current laws, and make it easier to understand and better organized. And these were the goals that were established by the Title 18 Ad Hoc Committee that was formed back before we started on this journey. The process itself was conducted in 3 different phases with lots of boards and commission meetings and affinity group meetings, and Planning and Development and Environment Committee, and some touch points with the full council, and we're here at the tail end of phase 3. In your agenda packet, you have multiple ordinances of the entire Title 18. They are from Exhibit A through I. Then there was a portion in Title 18 that we're moving to Title 2, which was generally the hearing examiner section and the Planning and Policy Commission. Also included is Exhibit K, which is the city's shoreline master program update. And also throughout this process, we've maintained a list of future updates. Those were things that came up during conversations, but there was a desire not to lose those, but put them in this list that was vetted out by the Planning and Policy Commission and also the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee. Title 18 includes these 9 things, different chapters and categorization, and then, of course, the SMP, which is the Shoreline Master Program. Where we are in the process today, we've had 6, 7, 8, I don't know, can't even count how many public hearings on these, but this is the final touch with council and one consolidated hearing to ensure that we are making sure all the anything that changed after Planning and Policy Commission gets to be discussed, and giving the community another opportunity to provide their comments. And the next step would be if council were requesting adoption at May 1st. So that pretty much is our portion. But as I said, tonight is to hear from the community one last time.
Thank you, Director Dollywell. I'm going to go to Committee Chair Hunt to give you an opportunity to provide any comments regarding the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee recommendation on this item.
Thank you. So the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee last met and discussed this item before our last Committee of the Whole meeting, where we discussed this land use code update at length. And so that meeting of the Committee of the Whole was March 13th. And we had a very thorough conversation. So I would direct us to that conversation for the full breadth of all the things that were considered. I will add, this has been a lot of meetings, a lot of public comment has gone into this, and it has been a great process where we have tracked many comments and the work of many people, from the volunteers on our commissions and staff, as well as council and the administration. So I will leave it at that, and I look forward to the public hearing.
Thank you. This is an opportunity for council to ask any questions at this time before I move into public hearing. Any questions? Not seeing any. So I'm now going to open the public hearing at 7:32 p.m. And again, if you're joining us virtually and would like to make comments, please raise your virtual hand or send the host a chat message. If you're on the phone, press *3, and if you've joined by computer or smartphone, look for a hand icon. If you're in the room and did not sign up, I will ask for other speakers before closing this portion of the meeting. City Clerk, has anybody signed up to speak or indicated a desire to speak?
Yes, Mayor Polly.
Thanks. Is there, so now this is the opportunity, I guess I need the first name of who signed up.
First on the list that signed up is Eric Ulner.
Awesome. And Eric is in the room. I'm going to come up to the podium.
Mayor Pauly and council members, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Eric Holliner. I reside at 1779 Harrison Court Northeast, and I'm here on behalf of the Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a few comments in support of changes we're proposing to Title 18, specifically the parking requirements for the food bank, and its in view of its unique mission and building use. We offered similar comments during the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee's March 28 meeting. So I'd like to briefly summarize those comments and outline the intent of the proposed changes we sent to Council in an email earlier today. The Issaquah Food and Clothing Bank is the city's direct resource provider of basic human services and is essential to maintaining the city's health, accessibility, diversity, social, and economic vitality, as outlined in the city's strategic plan and that of the city's Human Services Department. As our community's needs have grown, the IFCB has continued operating in a facility that is too small to accommodate the services it currently offers and is constrained by space from becoming the kind of multi-resource center that supports those strategic plans. While we studied several other potential sites, we concluded that our current location, ideally situated in the heart of downtown Issaquah, provides the best access, visibility, and proximity to other services. However, due to our limited property size and our core programmatic needs, providing on-site parking would significantly reduce our ability to expand the essential programs and services we provide to the community. As detailed in the email attachment, the changes we're proposing to Title 18 would provide additional flexibility in meeting our parking needs by offering a process that is data-driven by means of a TDMP, but opens a path by which we can meet those needs in ways the current code does not. We hope you will give strong consideration to our request, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. But I also wanted to thank Minnie and Christian and their team. They've been very supportive and very helpful in the process of kind of navigating the current code and seeking ways to improve the code so that we can have that additional flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. City Clerk, who else has signed up to speak this evening?
Mayor Polly, next we have Casey Kleba.
Come on up, Casey. I'm going to get you to push that little button on the, yeah, there we go.
No?
Now everybody
All right.
can hear you.
Great, thanks. Good evening, and Mayor Polly and members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. My name is Casey Kleba, and my wife Carly and I live at 1750 Brookside Drive in the Sycamore neighborhood of Southeast Issaquah. And I'm told we live on the southernmost lot in the city limit, which I tell everyone now. And we're right between Squawk and Tiger Mountains. We moved to Issaquah because we absolutely love nature, and we want to be surrounded by people who are actively engaged in protecting and preserving it. My wife Carly and I are avid wildlife photographers, and small plug, you can see some of our photos on my website, kleba.com. We love seeing all the wild visitors that the creek attracts, and of course the natural world around us has a lot of surprises each season, which we look forward to. We're here tonight because we were made aware of proposed Title 18 amendments that could allow us to make modifications to structures on our property. We are influenced by two critical areas, the Issaquah Creek and the Crystal Creek. And those are overlapping areas. Our home was built in 1970, and so we're well within the critical areas, meaning no modifications are currently possible, as I understand it. And so, if it were possible, or based on some of the language that we had read previously that I think is currently not considered an amendment to Title 18, exceptions like what was proposed would allow for homeowners like us to make needed improvements, and in our case, this means extra considerations for aging in place, as well as improvements for our safety and separation between us and those wild animals on our lot. We've actually had some pretty large bears walk down our front driveway. We've seen a coyote attacking a deer in our yard. I have it on video, and so on. So we'd be glad to work with the city council members in order to sponsor inclusion of language like this in the Title 18 proposed draft amendments for the final draft. Oh, I'm doing good. Yeah, thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak tonight in person. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. What's the website for your pictures?
It's my last name, KLEBBA.com.
Sounds interesting. Thank
Thank
you. City Clerk, do we have anyone else signed up on our sign-in sheet?
Mayor Polly, we have no one left on the sign-in sheet, but we do have some virtual hands raised.
Okay, I'm just going to come back to the room for a second. Is there anyone else here this evening that would like to speak to Title 18? Steve, do you want to come up, and then I'll head to the virtual.
First of all, I'll segue a little bit and add my thanks to the Ruth Kees and the Environmental Award winners. So thanks for recognizing them for their contributions. So back on track. I think there were three things I wanted to talk about or mention today. I kind of put it in the context of a story my science teacher told me a long time ago is if you put a frog in hot water, he immediately jumps out. But if you slowly raise the temperature, he'll die from not realizing the change has happened. So it seems like with Title 18, what I kind of think about in context also is, in the past couple of years, there's been stories of forest fires in California and Oregon and Washington, followed by atmospheric rivers, followed by flooding. And I'm concerned with the rate at which we're going to lose a lot of that environmental coverage with trees and forested and sloped landslides from 15 to 40 degrees if it's deemed to be environmentally, or not environmentally safe, but if it can be built safely without any consideration for maintaining the restrictions that don't allow us. We wanted to, we geared ourselves towards new development on the valley floor, not on the forest hillsides. And so I think the changes we're going to see that are being proposed aren't going to be seen in the next 6 months or even the 6 years, but the pace of the occupation has been decided, and we're going to lose too much. We're going to lose too much of that environment that we treasure and we say we want to keep. So I think that needs to be structured differently to not allow the development on anything above 15 degrees, if that. The second was SEPA requirements no longer being required for, and I'm not going to have this phrased as correctly as I should, I apologize, it's from 5 to 9 or 5 to 10 and plus the square footage size. One thing I'd like to know is whether or not there's statistics on what SEPA has required from previous thresholds and whether or not what we lose or might lose. I would also like to see even if this does, and it's more of a last-ditch effort, if we can have still have a SEPA requirement checklist required, even if it's not maintained, so we can understand what we're losing. I don't see that the city is really gaining very much. The cost for the developer to build those lots may go down, but the price of the housing is going to be the same price because the price of housing in Issaquah is astronomical. So we're not really gaining environment. What we're losing is that the taxpayers and the residents have to lose those environmental thresholds and pay for sewer and septic and lines that aren't in maintenance and pay for those costs for the developers maintaining the profit going to them. That seems unfair. The third threshold was allows development on private residential houses on the opposite side of the creek side or retained water retentions. It only requires a 5-year maximum standard to do some offsetting of things like removing invasive standards. So it puts the cost burden on the city to maintain that development standard and cost on the taxpayer for doing that. For permanently, there's going to be a permanent loss of retention, a summary, but only a 5-year requirement to offset that. That seems unfair. That seems cost burned on the city when we're already obviously facing a lot of requirements for fewer and fewer city dollars. So based on those things, those are the 3 things that come to mind. I'm going to try to be more articulate between now and your decision making that happens in May when that comes back. But those are the 3 thoughts come to mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. City Clerk, let's start to go through the online commenters.
Mayor Pauly, we have Christy online who would like to speak. Christy, could you tell us your last name? I'm making you panelist now. You should be able to address the council and turn on your video if you wish.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to make public comment. Council members, Madam Mayor, and team. First of all, I'd be remiss in not saying a huge congratulations to Robin, Ann, and John for the amazing work and dedication to our community. Such good stuff. So I'm here to talk about
Christine, we need your last name.
Oh, I said triple.
Oh,
I'm
sorry. I'm not sure if that came across. Thanks, Christy.
No problem. Sorry. One of the challenges of virtual environment. My apologies. So one significant area in Title 18 that remains a concern amongst our local real estate peers, both owners and developers is the issue of vesting at the building permit and the regulatory and monetary risks associated. As a last opportunity prior to adoption, I've been asked to bring this topic forward. As you know, predictability and consistency are necessary for both the city and the applicant. Issaquah's permitting has a significant number of steps and engagement through the process for land use, coupled with long processing times. The process also relies heavily on land use review and community input, which is an expensive undertaking up front, both in time and money. The review is a complex and comprehensive opportunity, so a lot of work gets done early on in the process. Vesting, among other factors, plays an integral role in the decision to build and invest in a community. To realize the multiple benefits for multifamily and commercial development, including job creation and sales tax revenue, revitalizing underutilized property as an example, the sea of parking lots, and continuing to make progress on housing accessibility, we ask that you help reduce development risk. Vesting at the submittal of a complete land use application as opposed to building permit is one such local tool you can employ to help promote investment in the changes you wish to see for Issaquah. It can also aid in ensuring community input early on can be retained with the completion of a project. Our hope is you'll consider this and request a change to the vesting language proposed in section 18.204.080. Lastly, thank you to all of you and those who provided the care and attention in the overhaul of Title 18 that it has been demanded. It's been a lot and it's been a journey. The resulting product is much to be celebrated with its clarity and organization. And I just want to share congratulations to Minnie and the team for a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Who's up next, City Clerk?
Mayor Pauly, there are no further virtual hands raised at this time.
Great. Well, thank you for everyone who provided comment during the public hearing. We did hear about parking standards, structural modifications in critical areas, investing and development risks. So thank you all for taking the time to come and address the council this evening. Is there any objection to closing the public hearing? Looking at the council, not seeing any head nods. So hearing none, the public hearing is closed at 7:47 p.m. And this item will be returning to the City Council for action at the May 1st, 2023 regular City Council meeting, as you've already heard. So thank you all. The next item of business this evening is under regular business. It's AB 8588. It is the preferred cross-section for TOW 028 Northwest Sammamish Road Non-Motorized Improvement Project. And actually, I should be thanking Minnie before she sneaks out of the room. Minnie, thank you. There are also a lot of comments about the amazing work that your team did in taking in all of this input. So thank you before you leave. So at this point in time, I'd like to invite Public Works and Engineering Utility Manager Matt Ellis, our Senior Transportation Engineer Marina Bandla, and Scott Johnson, the Project Manager with HDR, to present this item. So welcome, team.
Good evening. Give me 1 minute while I set this up.
Will do.
Okay, my apologies.
Matt, you have presenter privileges.
I know, I'm trying to
Okay.
get there. It's on the screen, it's small. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, it's not letting me. Okay, all right. All right. Good evening. I'm Matt Ellis, Utility Engineering Manager for the City of Issaquah, and I'm joined virtually by Marina Bondola, the Senior Transportation Engineer, and Scott Johnson with HDR, the Project Manager on the design team. And tonight we're talking about the Northwest Sammamish Road Non-Motorized Improvement Project and talking about the preferred alternative selection. So the purpose of tonight is to seek approval on the preferred cross-section for the roadway and seek authorization to proceed with the design and permitting and to share project coordination considerations. Our recommendation is to approve the preferred alternative for the Northwest Sammamish Road Non-Motorized Improvement Project, as shown as Alternative C, and authorize the administration to proceed with the design and permitting. So tonight's content is to provide a bit of background on efforts to date on community engagement, which led us to develop the alternatives and the evaluation criteria and refine the alternatives through discussions at the Transportation Advisory Board meeting in January and the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee meeting in March. This all led to the staff's recommendation for a preferred cross-section for this roadway. And we'll discuss the project schedule considerations and impacts with other projects within the corridor. So the project purpose is to provide bicycle and pedestrian facilities along Northwest Sammamish Road. The limits for this project are 193rd Place Southeast to the west and the State Park entrance to the east. So here's the project timeline. We began the project in earnest in 2022. We completed a topographic survey, started an environmental evaluation of critical areas, developed preliminary alternatives, and engaged with the community through a community survey, community open house in November, and the Transportation Advisory Board meeting. Our goal for the remainder of 2023 is to get the design rolling once we receive concurrence on the preferred cross-section and begin the environmental permitting process. Our goal is to be substantially complete with the design by the end of 2024 to the beginning of 2025. There will be multiple projects, both private and public, that will impact Northwest Sammamish Road starting this year and lasting for several years. And this work includes the culvert replacement work by WashDOT, for which we do not have a specific timeline, but know all work on their culvert replacement efforts must be completed by 2029 for 4 sites within the city. I will briefly describe all known impacts on a later slide. While this work occurs, staff will coordinate with WashDOT and all other parties while we procure necessary permits and develop construction documents. As shown, we have a relatively large construction window for this project at this point in time. We project the soonest we can begin construction to be 2027, while other work progresses along the corridor. We are showing the worst case scenario for completion if external work on the corridor gets delayed of 2030. We also, during this process, we commit to staying engaged with the community during this time, understanding that there will be impacts to the roadway for several years to come. We will engage with individual property owners and neighborhoods about specific design considerations and how the project will interact with folks who live along the corridor. We will provide construction coordination and public communication about the various construction work that occur along the corridor, and we'll hold an open house as we get closer to construction. So here's the existing conditions. The project can be broken down into 2 areas. The east half of the project is adjacent to the Sammamish Cove Park and is constrained between the freeway and steep slopes and wetland areas. We did do an evaluation of the bike and pedestrian facilities that this project will tie into. Facilities further east between SR 900 and the state park has an 8 to 10 foot multi-use trail on the north side with a 4 to 5 foot unprotected bike facility right next to it. On the south side of the roadway at this area, a sidewalk begins about 450 feet east of the state park entrance. The sidewalk varies in width between 7 feet and 8 feet and contains a 4-foot bike facility on that side. Existing conditions on the west half is adjacent to the sand wall that was installed by Washington State Department of Transportation in 2020 through 2021 and is located next to residential driveways and private streets. This section has additional room where WashDOT relocated a retaining wall, but it's constrained in areas where we need to match into existing steep driveways. And again, to carry on the evaluation of the bike and pedestrian facilities that this project will tie into. Further west, the roadway has a fairly consistent paved shoulder on both sides of the road, equaling about 5 to 6 feet on each side. This is not signed or marked as either a pedestrian or bike facility, though. Community outreach. A community survey was provided to the community between September 13th and October 3rd, 2022. We received nearly 600 responses to the survey. We had an open house in November of 2022 and had 48 people in attendance. And then we went to the Transportation Advisory Board on January 25th of this year and the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee on March 14th. Through this process, we determined that most people wanted a multi-use trail as a treatment facility that serves the community, accommodating multiple types of uses through the corridor. The second most desirable element was buffered bike facilities to protect cyclists and to separate commuter cyclists to those going at high speeds from intermingling with slower users on the trail. And then the biggest concern brought up was access to driveways, site issues, and potential conflict points with new pedestrians and bikes within the corridor. So we did an alternative development. After the community survey, we developed 6 cross-section options. We narrowed this down to 4 options after feedback from the open house. We presented these 4 options to the Transportation Advisory Board, and at this time we recommended a preferred cross-section with a second alternative. The preferred cross-section was Alternative C, a multi-use trail with intermittent planter strip and a buffered bike lanes, and the second alternative was Alternative A, a wider multi-use trail with full planter strip and no on-street bike facilities. As we went through the process, we evaluated 10 criteria that involved risks and level of impact, including impacts to wetlands, potential impacts to private property, constructability, code compliance, and many other constraints. We gave each of these criteria 1 point as we evaluated each cross-section. We then evaluated 5 criteria based on non-motorized use, including driveway access and safety for both vehicles, bikes, and pedestrians, pedestrian experience, and cycle experience for recreational users and commuter users. We gave each of these criteria 2 points each. We then completed a qualitative evaluation assessing each alternative to each other. The full analysis is in the packet. Based on the risk criteria, Alternative A, the wide multi-use trail with a planter strip and no bike facilities, scored the highest. This is because it had the smallest footprint, meaning the easiest to construct and the least impacts or concerns we needed to be aware of. Our estimate was approximately $11.5 million to complete the project between 193rd and the state park entrance. Based on the high emphasis non-motorized criteria, including user experience, Alternative C, the narrower multi-use trail with buffered bike lanes, scored the highest. This alternative is estimated to be $3 million more than Alternative A at roughly $14.5 million. This is based on a wider footprint, meaning larger retaining walls and more stormwater facilities. So I'm going to go quickly through Alternative A and Alternative C to give you a quick breakdown. Alternative A is a 14-foot wide multi-use trail. This provides a wide planter strip running the length of the project. This alternative does not provide on-street bike facilities. Cyclists must choose to either merge with traffic or, for westbound commuters, cross the street and travel along the trail. This alternative shows 10-foot travel lanes for vehicle use, which is a bit more constrained than is currently out there. The current lanes range between 10.5 feet and 11.5 feet in different areas of the corridor. The constrained travel lanes is shown on both alternative A and C and is one treatment to reduce speeds within the corridor. Alternative C shows a narrower multi-use trail that ranges in width between 8 feet if we really get constrained due to topography or property constraints, to 12 feet at its maximum.
Matt, is it okay to take a question from Councilmember Martz right now? How much more of your presentation is there?
Oh, we're about halfway.
Okay, so Councilmember Martz.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you said with a 10-foot street as a way to constrain traffic, would we potentially need to change the speed limit?
We'd be looking into that. Yeah, because we have gotten a lot of complaints from the residents out there that people are typically going faster than the 30 miles per hour that it's posted. And so we would look at ways to reduce that speed, and one option is to reduce the speed limit.
Does that road have a designation as any kind of higher, like a, I don't remember the term we use, but like a arterial, yes.
It is a minor arterial, yes.
Okay. So we'd have to move it down out of minor arterial status to do
No, I
that?
think we could keep it as a minor, Front Street is a major arterial, and that is 25 miles per hour. So I think we could do that, but there might be some constraints that we would need to look at as we look at speed limits.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thanks, Matt.
yep. So back to alternative.
Actually, I take that back.
so
Councilmember
sorry.
DiMichele.
Thanks. Following up on Councilmember Mart's question, do we know that reducing speed limits actually changes patterns of behavior that people have already established?
That is a good question. I don't know for sure. I know that it does help, but there would need to be more than just reducing the speed limit to make it work. So that's why narrowing those lanes down is one of those things that we're considering, because that would, for both alternative A and C, we're proposing that constrained width, and that will also help reduce speeds, because it makes it more uncomfortable to be going fast when you're right next to other cars. Yeah.
Thank you.
On alternative C, a planter strip would be installed intermittently, primarily in the section fronting driveways and private streets. This would help support trash pickup and bus stops. There is also a wider opportunity. So we would not be putting the planter strip when we need to put in a larger retaining wall near the Sammamish Cove Park. This alternative provides buffered street bike facilities. Cyclists coming from outside of the area or from other parts of the South Lake Sammamish neighborhoods can continue in the same direction without crossing the street or merging with traffic. This alternative, like I said, also shows 10-foot travel lanes for vehicle use, which is a bit more constrained than currently out there. And then the buffered bike lanes provides added protection between the narrow lanes and bike traffic. We went to the Transportation Advisory Board on January 25th. 6 members agreed with alternative C. 2 members agreed with alternative A. Those in favor of alternative C like that the facilities provided opportunities for more types of users, including recreational users, including those in the neighborhood, as well as those bike users who come from outside of the area, typically riding at a faster speed. This improves safety and comfort for both users. This also provides cyclists to stay in the lane of travel, as opposed to being forced to cross the street twice to enter and exit the multi-use path, or merge with traffic on a busy and fast arterial. Those in favor of alternative A like that it completely separates non-motorized users from vehicle travel. They like that the option provided a wider pathway for users, and it was a lower cost alternative due to it being a smaller footprint. On March 14th, we went to the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee. 2 council members were in attendance. We received a split decision from council members between preference for alternative C and alternative A. We heard alternative A was preferred due to wider trail width. Councilmember linked this feature to the community survey, which showed the multi-purpose pathway as the most desired facility. We also heard that alternative C was preferred due to the separation of high-speed cyclists and pedestrians by providing bicycle-specific facilities. We also heard from a few members of the public about poor existing pavement conditions and the truck Northwest Sammamish Road being used as a truck route, speeds of cars on the roadway and desire for traffic calming, concerns about driveway access, transit stops, and sight distance, and they want to make sure that there is access to the Sammamish Cove Park. So we did look at a few of these concerns after the Mobility Infrastructure Committee. Our consultant was able to provide some examples of waste receptacle pickup for properties adjacent to a multi-use trail. This one shown is similar to alternative C with a narrow planter strip between the multi-use trail and the roadway. We also looked at transit stops. The one shown wouldn't be the same as the one we are proposing, but shows an option for transit stops placed on a similar style roadway with a multi-use trail and bike facilities. And then truck routes. Northwest Sammamish Road is not designated as a truck route, and we will look into opportunities to improve signage to reiterate this. So with all that, staff, based on this information, the administration is recommending alternative C. And then I'm going to briefly go through project coordination before we have a discussion, unless you guys want to talk before we go into coordination.
I'm not seeing any questions right now, Matt, so go ahead.
Great. After the last presentation in the Mobility Infrastructure Committee, we compiled all the impacts we anticipate to Northwest Sammamish Road over the next several years. Projects in the area include, in 2023, the city plans to overlay Northwest Sammamish Road because the pavement condition is severely deteriorating. In 2024, the Hyla stormwater pipe will be installed. This is a private developer project that will install a stormwater pressure main under the freeway and along Northwest Sammamish Road before discharging near the lake within Sammamish Cove Park. In 2025 through 2029, the Washtenaw Fish Passage Culvert Replacement Project will occur, including the West Village Park and Schneider Creek relocation. That's approximately 2 to 3 years projected for just that portion of the project. We don't have a time frame for this work. We know that Washtenaw has a deadline to complete all work by 2029, and they have a lot of crossings to occur within the city. In 2026, TR22, Newport SR 900 to 54th, Phase 1 will occur. This will require a closure along Newport Way, forcing a detour onto West Lake Sammamish Parkway / Northwest Sammamish Road. We don't want to impact both arterials at the same time. In 2027, approximately Northwest Sammamish Road and West Lake Sammamish Parkway, we will be replacing water mains. This work can occur with or without the Northwest Sammamish Road Non-Motorized Improvement Project. This work includes replacing old asbestos cement pipes within the roadway. And finally, in 2028, TR28, Newport SR 900 to 54th, Phase 2 is scheduled to occur, although this time is still a bit more hazy and a little more flexible. So the earliest possible we could start Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized is 2027. An early start most likely means phasing the project, and a later start pushes the project out but gives us the entire roadway to work with. We will know more once Washtenaw awards the project to a design builder and they develop a proper schedule. Staff commits to engaging through this whole process, and this will define how and when we build our project. The next few slides show the projects just described in map form, and I'll go very quickly through these. So here in yellow is the limits of the project for Northwest Sammamish Road, and it shows the Hyla crossing, as well as the overlay limits for 23 and 24. Here are some utility projects along Newport Way for 2025. Here's the Washtenaw Fish Culvert Replacement projects at Lewis Creek, West Village Park Creek, and Schneider Creek. And again, we don't have a time frame for those yet. Here is the Newport Way SR 900 to 54th, Phase 1 and Phase 2, with the anticipated detour route along Northwest Sammamish Road. And that is 2026. And then here is the water line improvement work that we're doing along the entire West Lake Sammamish Parkway, Northwest Sammamish Road corridor that will impact traffic, but could occur in concurrence with this project. And again, just to reiterate on the WashDOT work, this slide shows the WashDOT project limits and the city's Northwest Sammamish Road project tied together. This is the new, shows the full extents. The proposed design estimate is for a 6-foot rise to Northwest Sammamish Road to accommodate a new stream alignment and bridge under the freeway at Northwest Sammamish Road. The design is not finalized, and WashDOT is currently developing a 30% design that will be passed off to their design builder. WashDOT will have a new bridge for Schneider Creek. They will be raising the roadway gradually up to 6 feet within the project area. There will be a planned detour routes for work along Newport Way and that will utilize Northwest Sammamish Road. And we also expect additional traffic to use Northwest Sammamish Road during work on I-90 within this area in an effort to bypass the construction along the freeway. The schedule is currently undefined between 2024 and 2029. However, WashDOT does commit to a forward-compatible project, meaning that they will construct their work so our project is not impeded and their bridge and roadway raising will accommodate our new roadway width. Forward momentum and compatibility. Our plan is to be substantially complete with the majority of work by the end of early 2025. As we look at future work elements, we will coordinate with all contractors in the corridor, continue to work with WashDOT, collaborate on a forward compatible project, complete environmental permitting, which can take a few years. We'll make sure our construction once construction begins, we are compatible with future stormwater requirements. As a more definitive construction window and plan materializes, we will finalize the design and construction documents. We will begin work as soon as the corridor is available to us. Through all of this, we will continue to meet and engage with the community. We will meet with the neighborhoods and property owners, provide updates on construction projects in the area, and provide an open house right before construction. And finally, the next steps. Here again is our timeline. As I said earlier, our goal is for the remainder of 2023 is to get the design rolling once we receive concurrence on the preferred cross-section and begin the environmental permitting process. Our goal is to be substantially complete with the design by the end of 24 through 2025. As the administration and staff have done with other significant corridor design projects that have many design choices and have involved lots of community engagement, we are seeking your concurrence for the proposed concept for Northwest Sammamish Road before the city spends additional funding on design. City Council last took a similar action in September 2022 for concurrence and authorization to proceed with the Newport Way Maple to Sunset project. Pending council direction, the project team will proceed with a 30% design level. Throughout this process, staff will continue to public engagement and coordinate with WashDOT and other contractors. So here are our options. Approve the preferred alternative for the Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvement project as shown alternative C. Option 2 would be to approve alternative A. Option 3 would be to not move forward with either alternative A or C and discontinue funding the preliminary design phase of the project. The impact, the city would not make progress in designing the project and may jeopardize its ability to compel WashDOT to design its project in a forward compatible fashion. And then thirdly, we could delay the selection of a preferred cross-section, but continue funding the preliminary design phase of the project. But the impact would delay the design and the project may not be forward compatible with WashDOT as they start to as they develop their project. So again, our preferred option is option 1. So our recommendation is to approve the preferred alternative for Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvement project as shown in alternative C and authorize the administration to proceed with design and permitting.
Thanks, Matt. That was a light presentation for sure. We always knew it was going to be complicated over there, but a lot has changed in the last few years. So we did have a couple of questions during the presentation, just checking to see about other questions now. Councilmember Ray.
Matt, when you look at the cross sections and it says 8 feet to 12 feet or 10 to 14, is that a range or is that a variability over the span of the path?
That would be a range, and it's, well, I'm not quite understanding your question. It's
Okay, let me put a point on it.
Okay.
So if so on option C, it's like 8 to 12 feet, so that's a 50% difference. And so what I'm trying to understand is, are we going to see a variability of the size, of the width of the path over the run from point A to point B, or is it, these are estimates because we're not quite sure?
Gotcha. It would most likely be 12 feet for the majority of it, where we have lots of room. But we want to show the narrowest opportunity where we have a very tight constraint, where we just can't get around something. We don't want to move a wall that restricts parking, or we just can't accommodate a driveway. So that's why we want to show that range.
Okay, perfect. That's what I thought. I just wanted to confirm before moving on.
Yep.
Other questions? Councilmember Mertz.
Yeah, help me get my arms around, we used to have effectively 3 ways to get west from the city. And, we reduced capacity on Newport because of community safety concerns. And just help me understand that we understand traffic is such a problem in our community, that we understand the implications of throttling back some of the capability now on the other of our westward roads, such that we now would only have, we'd have, two of our routes that are down to 25 miles per hour, and that we've looked at this and we understand the implications for putting more traffic onto I-90 is the question.
That's a great question. And again, in areas that we annexed into the city, we inherited what we inherited. And we also inherited the residences that live there and access those roads. So Matt, how does that factor into designing at the edges of the city? And what are your thoughts on that?
Councilmember Martz, can you repeat that one more time, just so I have?
Well, what I'm saying is, when I started on council a million years ago, we had both north and south of I-90 were, arterials that had, decent capacity and were seen as a way to go to Bellevue if you didn't want to get on I-90, or you were local traffic in the morning and you weren't going far away, and so you were just going into Bellevue. And during that time, we've moved to 25 miles an hour on Newport Way, and what it sounds like is this would likely need to move to 25 miles per hour on the north side. And this is a reduction in capacity, both in the 14 years that I've been on, a non-trivial reduction in capacity on the system. And I know that I haven't seen a system-wide model of traffic in some time, and I just want to know that we understand throttling back yet another arterial if we understand the implications for traffic that comes from that.
That's a good question. I don't have a great answer for you. I do know that on the freeway side, they have added an additional lane for both east and west traffic. So there's more capacity on the freeway. So it's going to be a hard model to kind of put all those things together with the additional traffic or the additional lanes on the freeway, plus the lower speeds on the side streets / our arterials. But I don't have a good answer for you at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Could you clarify, Matt? We're hearing the word or the term capacity. So is it capacity or is it travel time that changes? So is the number of cars that are actually passing through the new Newport Way configuration, is the total number down or is the travel time longer?
That I would have to check.
Okay.
Our
I think that would be
counts.
helpful to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll talk to our
Great.
team. Yeah.
Thanks. I still have 4 council members who haven't asked any questions. Are we all good? Do we have more questions on the presentation or ready to move on? Looks like we're ready to move on. Committee Chair Ray, would you like to provide the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee recommendation?
I would love to if there were one. At our March 14th meeting, the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee, Committee of 2 that night, reviewed the alternative cross-sections for the future Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvements. We had a robust conversation about the merits of the different cross-sections. Also, there was, as you would expect, considerable community interest in this project, and the questions being asked to the committee at this meeting was really to look at cross-sections, but the community interest was broader than that. So I just want to give a shout out to Matt Ellis, because Matt, you did a great job of being very candid with the community about the challenges we face, and also responding to their questions, and I think it made for a much more positive experience for everyone. So the committee was not of one mind on the optimal approach. Since we didn't reach a consensus as a committee, I'm not going to represent a committee recommendation, but I will express my personal views at this time. And from my perspective, option A provides the best option going forward, and it provides a grade separated path for both bikes and pedestrians, which provides a level of security and safety that people mentioned in the community meetings. I firmly believe that a 14-foot, and that's why I asked the question about the 14-foot versus 12-foot, a 14-foot path that is shared by pedestrians and bikes can be effectively managed. And just interestingly enough, I was driving down Westlake Sammamish Road last weekend, and I noticed that they have a single monodirectional path for both pedestrians and bicycles. So my preference is A, but I'm going to let Deputy President Hall talk about his preferences. But I did want to end with, regardless of what we choose to do, we need to move forward with this project. And, you know, despite the barriers of making this take far, far more longer than we want and more complex than we'd ever hoped, it's a pressing need for our community to have this non-motorized connectivity. So I'll let Deputy President Hall go from there.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you. I guess this is revealing it early, but I'm still not convinced that that's the right alternative, and I'll be sharing comments later on during comments. But the only other thing I wanted to mention from that committee, because it was, by the way, Councilmember Ray had been chair for maybe, this was your second meeting, an excellent committee chair. Very well, very well done. So I think if the chairs are interested in taking a look at how he managed that meeting, I thought that was just, I was very impressed. Anyways, we also talked about kind of assuming the project would have to come after some of this WASDOT work coming on, what could be done in the meantime. The community was also saying what was frustrating them. So some of the things that bubbled up of things to potentially look in the meantime are what are the kind of cheap traffic calming measures that we can employ. Paint even came up, something really cheap, like what are the kinds of things that we can do. Addressing the road surface quality because it is terrible. And then also other kind of intermediate solutions that could get us to the next one. And then also we made a request that at 193rd, Westlake Sammamish Parkway begins, and that work isn't really living in any document in the CIP or anything like that, so we just asked that that be something that's kind of added to the future projects list in the CIP so it lives in the document. And that was the only thing, I think. Right?
So we haven't had a motion yet. Okay, question. Let's go for question.
On the potential 14-foot wide, I think it's 10 to 14, right? Or is it 14?
I think so. I can go back to it if you guys, if you want.
Is it a solid 14?
It is 10 to 14. Again, that's the same thing as the other one where it'll be 14 for the majority. But if we do get to a constraint, we would narrow it down for a short period of time, 10 feet being the smallest we would go.
So my question is around, I know rockets, but I don't know transportation engineering. And is there a international standard or a national standard around multi-use or multimodal bicycles and pedestrians, and how does 10 feet compare to that standard, and how does 14 feet compare to that standard? In other words, do we have a civil engineering standard that makes us feel comfortable with these widths with pedestrians and bicycles?
Yeah,
Thanks.
we usually use, that's a good question. The Washington State Department of Transportation design guides is a good one. There's a couple other ones out there. 8 feet is the minimum that they recommend for a multi-use trail for a short period of time. That's why we're showing that in alternative C as for very constrained sections if we need to narrow it down. And I don't remember what the recommended, I think it's between 12 and 14 is the standard width for a multi-use trail.
And that's what, you said Washington State?
The WashDOT design
WashDOT
manual.
standard, design
Yeah.
standard, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Would, if there's no more questions, would the committee chair care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move to approve the preferred cross-section alternative A for the Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvement project and authorize the administration to proceed with design and permitting.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to move with the preferred cross-section alternative A. Discussion. Councilmember Ray.
I think I may have covered most of the points I wanted to make, but like I said, I think this is the option that the community overwhelmingly has supported, and I think they have a better sense of what they're looking for. And the major reason for having the bikes separated is for high-speed commuting, and I just don't believe, quite honestly, that we're going to have contention between pedestrians and high-speed commuting at the same time. And I also believe that there are ways for us to manage the 14-foot roadway in such a way that it doesn't create a conflict between pedestrians and bike, and at the same time gives our bicyclists and our pedestrians that extra sense of safety of having the median strip and also having the grade separation with the curb.
Thanks. I'm going to move to the second next, if that's okay, and then go Council President and Deputy. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. First of all, I want to thank all the people that sent us comments. It was really a robust outpouring of opinion, and it really did cause me to go back and review the two schematics again and rethink, because I think originally I was thinking that C looked very viable, but when I went back, and especially the comments we received from people talking about younger children going along there, and then you look at alternative C and you see how there is absolutely no protection there for little kids who may be learning how to ride bikes or wavering around or whatever. And even with adults on bicycles, if they hit a rock there, there's nothing that keeps them separated from cars in that in alternative C. So I think just from a safety standard, perspective, that alternative A is my preferred alternative. I knew that the concern was that we would have bicyclists speeding along with the pedestrians. And I think that there are management tools that we could use to mitigate that, just as we're looking at reducing the speed on that roadway. We could look at other ways to change the culture along the pedestrian path as well. So signage could be one, or having community outreach to educate people and taking those kinds of measures. I think we could start to change the culture along that trail. The other thing is that we don't know exactly what the volume on that trail would be. I know the community is really looking forward to it, but there are times during the day when there might be very little traffic out there. So I think altogether, we heard from a lot of people that preferred alternative A, But I didn't want to just go on public opinion. I wanted to go back and look at the schematics and see which one made the most sense. And when I looked at it from the perspective of families, not just adults, but families and young children, alternative A clearly to me is the preferred alternative. So that is the one I'll be supporting, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DiMichele. Council President and then Deputy Council President.
Thank you. I will echo a lot of what I've heard. This project has really been a long-time community priority. It's been something that council has been banging our gavels about for a while and emphasized in our recent CIP and budget. Really heartened that we're making progress on this. And then you come out and say, but WashDOT is going to come through and want to put a 6-foot raise to this, and so you can't have your project. I'm like, okay, but so I'll step back from that. I will be making a motion after this, recognizing the delay and looking at a temporary way to address a temporary protected bike lane. But in this case, I appreciate that the concept of we have to have a preferred cross-section, even if it isn't going to be constructed for many, many years out, because we need to have something to give to WashDOT and say, look, this is how you have to build your project so that it's compatible with this. So I really appreciate that we are taking that into consideration, even if my heart is broken that we're sitting here and going, we don't want to waste $11 or $14 million by building it now and having it torn up by WashDOT. So I do think that not only the overwhelming support of the community, the residents in South Lake Sammamish, who are really going to be the highest users of this, and honestly, any area where you see biking happening in a high usage realm, the Netherlands as an example, is all separated multi-use paths. And so I think that just needs to be our standard rather than telling people that are riding as commuters that they have to risk themselves on bike lanes that are next to traffic. I think we can utilize this area in a very effective way for both bikers and walkers and new bikers and commuters, and we will find a way with paint or signs or education to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Deputy Council President?
Thank you very much. Just real quickly, I want to take a point of personal privilege. I grew up in the South Cove neighborhood, so I've biked and walked and driven Northwest Sammamish Road more times than I can count. So this is very special for me, and I want to thank the people of Issaquah for allowing me to sit up here to make a decision on this. It seems like some of you have made up your mind. I have a very structured argument that I would like to present before you, and I would ask that you keep an open mind. So I want to start by setting some context here because there are some, like I said, some important points that I want to make. So first, just taking a big step back, the survey results were really cool to read. So first, of greatest concern to residents, as was said, there's lack of sidewalks, and there's the quality of existing bike facilities. And just a reminder, these are people saying, what is your number one concern? So if it's not that quality of existing bike facilities is second, it's that it was second for people who it was their first concern. So again, just a little small thing there. Also, when asked what modes of transportation they prefer, we got some interesting results that I wanted to highlight. 55% of respondents prefer to drive on Northwest Sammamish Road today, but in the future that number falls to 29%. Today, only 19% and 25% prefer to walk and bike respectively, but in the future, those numbers shoot up to 32% and 37%. So I just want us to just take a moment and appreciate how amazing that is, that by responding to this community priority that has been in existence for a very long time, we can make real, measurable progress on our mobility master plan goals, which does not happen very often, to be able to make a change this dramatic. So anyways, very exciting to get those results, and it was very exciting to go over them in committee too. Speaking of the mobility master plan, I want to take a little bit of time and walk through a few goals here too. As we all know, goal number one is about proactive safety, which is to provide safe and comfortable streets that encourage people to travel by walking, bicycling, and transit. Goal 4 is walking, to build a system that enhances local connectivity and is tailored to prioritize a comfortable walking network. And goal 5 is bicycling. Develop a bicycle network that attracts people of all ages and all abilities and provides access to destinations throughout the community. So, given all that and everything that we've heard from staff, there are some project priorities that I think rise to the top. The first of which being address the concerns of the South Lake Sammamish community, of course. Also recognize that the residents that live directly on Northwest Sammamish Road have very unique challenges. I don't envy them. Provide safe, convenient pedestrian connection to the state park and beyond. Support local and regional multimodal network connectivity. Meaningfully understand our spacing limitations, the impact on retaining walls, impact on wetlands, impact on right-of-way, avoid these complications with WSDOT as they pursue their culvert projects, and then have a clear, transparent communication about how we plan to fund the project. Those are just some of the things that we've talked about that seem to be priorities of this council and the community over the years that we've talked about this. So our job tonight then is to digest all of this information and match it with an appropriate design, the design that we think is most appropriate with that. Now, we definitely haven't been able to check off all the boxes of those priorities, understanding the limitations with regard to spacing and such, and the retaining walls and WSDOT's slow progress as they figure out what the timeline of their projects, and then also how we're going to fund the project. We haven't been able to fully check these boxes yet. But from where I'm sitting, it's just one of 6. Alternative C seems to check most of the boxes in my mind. So I want to quickly go over why I think so. So Alternative C addresses the resident concerns. You got a new pedestrian facility, which addresses the greatest concern with the lack of sidewalks. Improvements to existing bike facilities, which is the second greatest concern, that the bike facilities are outdated. And it supports how residents want to get around in the future, which addresses the survey results more generally. People want to get out of the cars. They want to bike. They want to walk. It also, Alternative C also supports the safety, walking, and bicycling goals of our mobility master plan, the ones that I just read. And it's really easy to see how these are aligned. It might even seem obvious, and that's where it gets tricky. So this is where I want to dive in just a minute. I want to call out 2 elements of these goals in particular. The first is comfort. All of the mobility master plan goals I read off earlier call out comfort in some way. Our aim is to promote comfortable streets, comfortable walking experiences, bike networks that attract people of all ages and abilities. Personally, I'm having a hard time imagining how Alternative A aligns with that aim. I'm worried it's not a comfortable walking experience if bikers are racing by you on either side. And I'm worried it's not an attractive biking experience for bikers of all abilities if high-speed commuter bikers share facilities with recreational bikers, pedestrians, electric scooters, or whatever else may come our way in the future as that continues to innovate. The second reason that I think Alternative C supports the mobility master plan goals best is bike network connectivity. We call out this bike network connectivity many times in the mobility master plan, and our aim is to support continuous connections both within our city and within the broader regional network of bike facilities. A shared multi-use path, in my mind, means that connections are disjointed, especially when you look west as Northwest Sammamish Road becomes Westlake Sammamish Parkway, and as you look east as Northwest Sammamish Road connects into our regional growth center, both of which have separated bike facilities. They're not called that. They just happen to be facilities that people ride their bikes on. So in both directions, those exist. So in order to, in my mind, in order to address community needs and support city mobility goals that we spent a considerable amount of time crafting as a council and as staff, our design has to have a new dedicated pedestrian facility and improved separated bike facilities. And for that reason, I'm going to vote no on this motion, but I just want to make it clear that I'm absolutely for something to be here. I just prefer Alternative C. And then also, again, in the meantime, there are some things that we could be doing given the timing of this all with regard to traffic calming on that road, with regard to fixing up the surface quality and potential other solutions, and then adding Westlake Sammamish Parkway to the future items list. So I've kind of just spewed all that at you. I'm curious, even the people who have already spoken, if there are any points in particular that we kind of want to dig into as a council. If not, that's okay. I just wanted to be able to make my case that I think Alternative C is more closely aligned with both resident interests and our goals, as I said.
So Councilmember Hall, you have an option. You can always make a motion to amend the motion to Alternative C and have a conversation and see if you get a second, and you'll have a good sense of where everybody's head's at if you do that.
Well, yeah, I think I'll do that then. So, and we'll just see where everyone's head at if you want to have, so there would just be an amendment.
It gives you a
to the
possibility
motion.
for a conversation, but it also shows that you're in favor of the main motion, which I think is one of the points you were trying to make at the end of it. You're not against the project. You're just in support of a different alternative. So
Yeah.
you can make a motion, and then that would allow all 6 of your fellow council members. You said you were one of 6. You're actually one of 7, but a couple of them caught that.
Oh, 6 others, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you were to make that motion, that would allow you to have an on-camera conversation with the 6 of them about option C.
Yeah, as long as someone wants to second something like that. So I guess then I would move to amend the motion to substitute Alternative C for Alternative A.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. And I think Councilmember Hall has shared his ideas very clearly. So please raise your microphones, whoever would like to comment. Councilmember Hunt, followed by Councilmember Joe, I think.
I'll start with a question. So it was raised also in the presentation that the option A, you would have to cross the street, I believe for the eastbound folks. And so I'm wondering how you would imagine that being done with their and safely.
It's a good question. We would need to have a crosswalk at 193rd at the east project limits. I'm sorry, at the west project limits, and then at the state park at the east project limits. So it would have to be, it's not a a mid-block crosswalk, but it would almost feel like one because you'd basically go down the roadway and there would be a crosswalk. There would need to be treatments to get that bicyclist across the street.
Okay, thanks. And then the other point that was raised was about the disjointedness of the lanes. And I believe in the city there are other places where lanes end. And so I'm wondering what the plan would be for connecting the bike lanes to the multipath if we went with that one, the multipurpose path.
That is a good question. So we'll go with the worst part, the west side. There is currently no plan, although as we talked about in the Mobility Infrastructure Committee, to have that as a long-range project on the TIP to extend whatever facilities along the west side of the project on West Lake Sammamish Parkway. Right now, like I said, there's 6-foot shoulders. They're not designated bike or pedestrian facilities, but people do utilize them for both on both sides of the roadway. On the east side, there is a multi-use trail just past the state park entrance. That's about 8 to 10 feet, depending on where you look. There's also bike facilities designated on both the north and south side of the roadway. So they would connect. That's part of the design elements, is trying to figure out how that all kind of merges together, so that way it doesn't feel disjointed. That's part of our next process, is to figure out the end treatments as well as considerations for the driveways.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think the part that resonated most with me of your arguments, Council Deputy President Hall, was the disjointed aspect, and I would definitely look for continued work on how best to connect those sections. I think that is super important, especially where we can connect to the bike lanes that are already in the city. So I think that will be important and will be needed to be worked on, and continue also conversation with the community about how best to do that. The point that I have a different take on is the comfort point, and ultimately that's one of the reasons why I won't be supporting option C. So the only time I have ever commuted as an adult on a bike was when I lived in the Netherlands, and that was on multi-use paths. And that's because I'm not very confident or, I would not be comfortable riding right next to fast-moving cars. And so I was comfortable, though, riding in the Netherlands, and I did that every day, multiple times a day for my entire time living there. So for me, it would be much more comfortable, both for me if I think about myself as a potential bike commuter, but also as a mother of small children, one of which still has training wheels. I can't imagine going with my family on a fast-moving bike lane, so without a separation. So that separation also gives me a lot of comfort as when I think about it from a perspective of a mother of young children. We also heard that from several community members. So that's the main reasons, but why I won't be supporting this, but I do appreciate it being brought forward and the arguments you made.
Thank you, Councilmember Hunt. Councilmember Joe, I think you were next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think I can speak as eloquently as Deputy President Hall did on the importance of this project in general, and then his arguments for Alternative C in particular. However, I'll give a little bit of a different perspective for why I'm supporting Alternative C. Many of you know that I was an attorney in the past, and when I did take a personal injury case, oftentimes the worst ones that occurred were because there were different speeds on the same road, or different speeds as cars were merging together. And so I like C in the sense that the bikes are in the bike designated area, and the pedestrians are all on a sidewalk that's a little bit separate. And I kind of equate it to the situation where I took one of my children on a path that was a bike pedestrian path along a river in a city that will not be named. But as the bicyclists were whizzing by at their 15 or 30 miles an hour, however fast they were going as they were making their speed records, I felt really uncomfortable having my child in their little tricycle going along and puttering along at 10 miles an hour, and immediately had to take them off. Also, if, as I and all of us are growing a little bit older, we're not running on those paths anymore, perhaps we're walking, or in some cases shuffling along. And in that case, I think that if I were shuffling at a slower speed than I am now, which is inevitably going to happen, having people of different speeds whizzing by me also would make me uncomfortable as I'm going through. So those are the arguments that I like for C. Also, I hear from bicyclists that talk about how they really see Issaquah as kind of a haven when they're riding along. And it's a haven because we have bicycle lanes that are designated, bicycle lanes that are thought out, and they don't have to take extraordinary measures, or at least breaking the cycle of their ride to cross the street to get to the other side, to get back onto their pace of riding again. They have comfortable lanes that are wide enough that at least are designated for them so that people know to watch out for the bicyclists there. They know to expect the bicyclists there on both sides of the road as they're going. So that's why I'll speak in favor of Alternative C. I appreciate the comments that Deputy Council President Hall put forward. But as he stated, I would be in favor of any alternative that we do push forward tonight, but I thought the discussion of Alternative C should occur. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you. Well, I always appreciate Deputy Council President Hall's very thoughtful comments, so thank you very much for those. For me, safety trumps comfort. And we heard from folks about speeding about distracted driving, about cars going onto the shoulder to go around cars that were stalled, or going around very dangerously to pass other cars. And so I think that there were some very good questions from Councilmember Martz about the speed limits. And I'm wondering if we did lower the speed limit to 25, would that have an unintended consequence of actually making some people more frustrated and therefore taking more risks? And it would be nice if we all drove along in nice lanes and never took chances, but I think we have to be thoughtful about the fact that even a car going 25 miles an hour, if it hits a pedestrian or hits a bicyclist, is going to cause severe damage. And there is nothing in Alternative C that protects bicyclists from that encounter. And so that, I don't think I can get past that. I look at that and I think, I don't want, I have a grandnephew that lives in the South Cove area, and I would not want that child to be in that bicycle lane with a car that's going 25 miles an hour and have that encounter. I just can't get past it. So I'm going to support Alternative A. And as I said, safety to me trumps comfort. So thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Council President, I want to come back to you, but after I do an initial round. Thanks. Councilmember Ray, followed by Councilmember Mertz.
Thank you, Mayor Pauly. Fantastic discussion. And I think what we can all agree to is what we want to do is to create an environment where people feel that their needs and their desires to move from one part of town to the other and not take their cars is provided. And ultimately, I think the question really comes down to perspective and opinion, and whether or not you think this approach or that approach is safer and provides a more comfortable experience for people, and it will encourage people to take advantage of this option or this investment when we make it. So, and I think that if we tease this apart, we all want the same thing, and we're just seeing it through a slightly different lens because of our own lived experiences. So, I think we've all said this. Both options are great. We just think that there's a difference of which is greater, and I think that that's what we're really coming down to here. And then going back to the original question, the most important thing is that we do something and we get going.
Thank you. Councilmember Mertz.
I still have to ask staff a question. I can't tease out from these materials what the folks in South Cove said they wanted. Was there a statement made that there was a perceived preference one way or the other in either the survey results or the open house? Because I've just been looking over and over. I'm pretty good with numbers. I can't find where that preference lurks.
So we didn't have, during the survey, we didn't have cross sections teased out yet. During the open house, we did, but we didn't receive a definitive response or collective answer for either from the community. We did say that they liked both elements of both and disliked certain elements. Certain people didn't want trees along the corridor because it uproots the sidewalk or it creates a barrier that people can't see. People were worried about bike traffic as they're going through to multi-directional and exiting their driveway. Other people really wanted that commuter bike facility because it's a use that certain people in the community utilize, and it would be more difficult with one option over the other. But we did not get a definitive answer from either the survey or from the open house.
Okay.
One more piece, Councilmember Martz. There was, I'm not sure if Council President or who requested it today, but there was an email of just recent correspondence, literally last 24 hours of correspondence, And Council President maybe can describe better what was in that.
Yeah, there were 15 emails with a strong preference for option A. Almost all of them that specifically mentioned an option were all option A.
That's helpful. Thank you. So I am going to oppose the amendment on 2 reasons. One is that I was lucky enough for many years to commute from here when Blue Origin had its facility in Sodo. And so I would ride my bike over, and I actually there's a multi-use version of this in Bellevue. And I was very comfortable as a bicyclist with my interactions with pedestrians. And my challenge was with dog owners who would let their dog owners run off leash, and their dogs would want to interact with my bicycle, which was bad for them and bad for me. But the second reason is that I mentioned being a rocket scientist, and as a mechanical engineer, energy equals 1/2 mv squared. And so the faster you go, the energy builds up really fast. And so either of these options would be great. I think we all, that's what I'm hearing from everybody. But, if I have to weigh the concerns about, heaven forbid, a bad interaction between a car and a bicycle versus, heaven forbid, a bad interaction between a bicycle and a pedestrian, the bicycle and the pedestrian, the energies involved are an order of magnitude less than they are with the car, even setting aside the fact that the car is so much heavier, just owing to the velocities involved. So, and I have some background with doing impact work as well. So for those reasons, I am going to oppose the amendment and support the original measure. But I thank Councilmember Hall for his well thought out explanation of why he supports C. I totally get it, but I'm sticking with A. Thank you.
Thanks. And well, on this round, Council President is not opted to speak. I'm going to go back to the Deputy Council President for round 2.
Thank you. I actually just wanted to ask a question, make sure we're operating under the same information. So there have been a couple comments about, ensuring that we're not putting, like, for example, children bicyclists in harm's way. So when you look at the mobility master plan in terms of biking, there are different level of stress areas, LTS, that talk about the speed and also just the fearlessness, is how we describe it in the report, of bikers. And that LTS 4 is for kind of commuters, kind of high sport bikers that would tend to bike in the actual traffic. And then as you go down, you would move into the sidewalk and stuff like that. So having read that and going into the committee, whenever that was, I had assumed that the bike lanes would really be for the people who are most using those bike lanes, which are commuters, sport, high-speed bicyclists, whereas if you're a recreational bicyclist, you'd still be in that multi-use path. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I think it's totally fine. Very good points all around and fair. I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that. So, thanks.
Thanks. Council President?
Thank you. I really appreciate that Council Deputy President has brought this up. I think for my perspective, the point of making sure we have connectivity is really important. And so I think I emphasize that idea of we really need to get that crossway right at either end of this. I still would be more in support of alternative A because of that safety issue. My husband has commuted through that on a bike, and I don't want him next to the cars, even though he's not a kid. It's a safety and life safety issue for that support. So I think it is entirely appropriate to have people on bikes that are commuting or just recreational have to cross the street at areas in order to get to a protected area. If it was my ideal street and we had more space, we would want to put a protected area on either side. But given the constraints on this, I think it is better to have a protected area than not. So
Thank you, Council President. So everybody's had an opportunity to speak. Sure.
Just one more clarifying question. None of this design would prevent a biker from biking in traffic, would it?
No, that's correct. Either one, they can bike into traffic if they want to.
Or across the street and join the
That's
big
correct.
multi-use? Okay, thanks.
That was a great point, because I bike in traffic more than I
Well,
do in the lane, just
I-
because they can see you better.
Just for
Saying.
context too, there are some pretty major bike races that use that road every year. So I just want to make sure that we're being
Thoughtful.
cognizant and thoughtful of kind of the many use cases of this road.
So thank you for starting this all off, Deputy Council President. If there's no more comments, I'll call for the vote on the amendment first, which is substituting alternative C for alternative A. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I have 2 ayes. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The amendment fails, 2 to 5. Is there any additional discussion before we move to the main motion? Not seeing any. Deputy Council President.
Super quick, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to say that I'm going to vote yes for this because I think that I would have preferred another design, but as been said by others, no matter what, this is a great project. We need to make progress on it for this community that's been asking for it for a long time, and I think they deserve to see the council support whatever design we want to go forward, and I'm going to all in on this new design now, so that's the way we want to go. So.
Fantastic. The motion on the table is to approve the preferred cross-section alternative A for the Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized improvement project and authorize the administration to proceed with design and permitting. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries 7-0. Matt, thank you for a fantastic presentation of an extremely complicated and difficult project that we are going to complete at some point. Well done. Yep. Council President?
Yes, I have an additional motion here. I move to direct the administration to return to the City Council at the May 15th regular meeting with feasibility, cost estimates, and other considerations for a temporary protected bike lane on Northwest Sammamish Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Council President, I would ask before you speak to it, can the administration talk to you about the practicality of being able to collect all that information by May 15th and maybe potentially the legal risk that might be associated with it? Can we provide council with some information?
Yes.
Thanks. Matt or Director Moon, I'm not sure who would like to address it, but there's been a request for information of sorts. I'm not sure how technical in nature, and obviously you guys have a full plate, so I'm not sure who is most comfortable in talking about capacity to complete that request.
Let me
Unless
take it.
it's the city administrator.
We understand that the council president would like, if this is passed by the council, to do this summer. So that would require some extra urgency. So I think the council, when considering the motion, would understand that in order for us to comply with the motion, we need to do this rather quickly. And so we, in talking with the city clerk, put forward the date. So this would mean, I think, a fair amount of staff work. We would likely have to put a few things aside for a week or two in order to do that. We're very concerned about the safety concerns and the liability to the city with whatever we would do, even the most optimal project, if cost was no object, what that would be. I know the city attorney is here, and we've asked her to take an initial look just as to what liability would there be even before we would start designing it. So yes, if the motion is passed by the council this evening, we would need to redirect some staff work. Some projects would have to go on pause, I would think, at least for a week or two in order for us to do this, in order to come back, because if we don't come back in May and the desire is to have it this summer, it wouldn't happen.
Okay. Thanks for being here tonight, Rachel. Not sure about your familiarity with this kind of request we have a project coming and we have a rural road right now that is definitely problematic. And what are your thoughts or concerns that might feed into the conversation that council would like to have tonight?
Well, first of all, I will say, I do think it's a really admirable request. I've driven on this road many times myself. I am personally afraid of driving in any bike lane, so I can understand, the hesitation here, and I do think that additional protective measures would be lovely. My concern from a liability perspective is we currently have a road that is properly designed with properly designed bike lanes. Now, we realize that maybe there is currently a bike lane on this. It's one of those.
It's not designated a bike lane.
It's just one that people are,
It's a
shoulder that people are riding
Paved
on.
shoulder. It's a paved shoulder.
It's a
Rachel.
paved shoulder.
Yeah,
So
this was a
currently,
railroad.
okay, so then currently folks that are riding their bike then are supposed to be then riding
In the road.
abiding by regular
Yeah.
traffic rules. In order for us to create a bike lane, that requires us to meet certain standards, and I'm not sure that even with a month that the city staff can do the work that would be required to meet them to a level that would not provide any risk. I mean, it's just not something where you can go out there and just kind of like eyeball it and say, well, let's just, demarcate and kind of block off the shoulder so that it's, there's some sort of, I'm missing the word here, but a
Protected by.
protective barrier. There's a barrier between the road, the cars and the bicyclists. In order to actually construct a bike lane would require us to do it based on either FHWA or WashDOT standards. We'd have to have probably consultants look at this stuff. I mean, you can't even lower a speed limit in Washington without doing a formal traffic study. So this is stuff that is pretty complicated and requires a lot of analysis. And the city is responsible for defects in its road, and you're liable for any sort of defects. So if you didn't do it right, then you would be potentially liable. So right now, even if it's not an ideal situation, the road is a road. It was presumably constructed properly, and it's really on bicyclists to maintain their own safety. I think if you were to do this, you would not only give folks a false sense of security, but you'd potentially be creating hazards that, if you didn't do it perfectly, you could end up in a situation where if someone was injured, the city was liable.
So I think, Matt, did you have something to add? Because what I want to do is let the motion maker speak to the motion as well.
So just a couple other elements to talk to is that it is a constrained roadway where we don't have a lot of width. So to provide additional width for a bike facility, we would have to create space, and there currently isn't much. Also, if we did a protected bike facility, there's concern because we wouldn't have a lot of width for that bike facility. And if someone's walking and then there's a bike in that protected bike facility, there's no opportunity for that bicyclist to get around a pedestrian. So again, not knowing much about what we would propose, but those are some concerns.
I think just adding a little bit of context like that is helpful. So I'm going to go to the motion maker and let her speak to the motion. And who seconded it? And then actually, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you. I appreciate that there are legal concerns. I appreciate that there are engineering concerns. My concern at this point is the residents have been waiting for this for a long time. There are extreme safety concerns, and I think the safety concerns need to trump the liability, the potential liability concerns in these cases. It would be horrendous if we were going to sit here and say, it's okay if people, decide to bike there and, choose to take their risks. That's up to us. And honestly, at this point, so talking to the council, what we heard in the previous presentation is that there is a 2023 planned overlay for this road. We're already going to be restriping this road. What I'm asking the administration to do, whether it's for that May 15th or whenever it coordinates with this planned overlay and required restriping, is to provide some sense of protection for bike users. On one side, you know, if that's all we can get, I think we can look at Newport Way as it heads into Bellevue. They have what is a temporary bike structure with just those like stand-up cones. I think I would prefer an actual curb that provides more of a safety situation. But I just cannot consciously sit here and tell the community we're approving this really great project, but you can't have it until 2030. And until then, you need to risk yourself if you're going to choose to bike or walk on that area. I just don't think that's something that we can let stand. So that's why I'm making this proposal. I'm open to other date ranges or other adjustments, but I want to be able to take advantage of the 2023 planned overlay as a way to utilize something so that we don't have to wait 7 years.
Councilmember Ray?
Thanks, Mayor Pauly. The motion doesn't say direct the administration to put in a protected bike lane. It says to explore the feasibility, cost estimates, and considerations. I think we got some considerations today. I'd like to give you some more time to consider them and come back with a fully baked, well-reasoned, giving you the time to think it through. What are the liabilities? What are the implications? What are the things we need to consider? It's a long list of activities. You've got a month. That's not a long time. And so if there's a need for more time, that's reasonable. But I think it's a fair to say, let's dig a little deeper and let's see if this can be done. And the council president's right. We're going to be doing some work on this roadway. And if we could make that work, that's really super. But let's be thoughtful about it and let's dig into it and go from there. So that's my take on it. This isn't saying, build the thing. This is saying, come back and tell us what it would look like.
Thanks. I didn't see, it was Martz or DiMichele. Councilmember Martz, followed by Councilmember DiMichele.
So first off, unfortunately, it does appear there's a couple places on the north side of Northwest Sammamish that we have it striped as bicycle lane. It's just at the eastern end, but if we don't actually consider that a true bicycle lane, we probably should not have it striped as a bicycle lane. The only thing that's going to fundamentally change things, I'll just say, as someone who is who has been a bicyclist through this area, ambiguity is our enemy. And I don't really want to do anything to, I think that as long as this is a narrow road, bicyclists need to treat it as if they're part of the traffic flow. And until we do something that fundamentally widens the asphalt that is available such that we can do something like option A, I don't want to give people a false sense of security that doesn't exist. So I understand the urge to do something. I will tell you that what I have heard from the community is on the pedestrian side, not on the bicycle side. Whenever I've heard from the community, it hasn't been a concern around bicyclists, it's been a concern around pedestrians. And so I don't think doing something in the interim, if it doesn't lay down more concrete, it's not going to change the fundamental physics of a very narrow stretch of road that's jammed between, lakeside houses and the freeways. So I guess I'm not in favor of this additional motion because I just worry that it would send an ambiguous signal to bicyclists who need to be extremely cautious on this stretch of road, no matter what, until we get more pavement. Thanks.
Councilmember DiMichele.
Well, Councilmember Martz said pretty much what I was going to say. I drive that road very often. There are places on there where I feel like if we took any roadway away, we're actually making a more dangerous situation. That little, I don't know, I think it is the place that they call the pinch point, is so narrow. Going through there, I'm always extremely cautious about going through there, and to take even a few feet off of that road and force everybody in the middle, and as Councilmember Martz said, a false sense of security would be created, and I'm not sure that we wouldn't actually make the situation worse. My other question would be for our city administrator. I'd like to know specifically which projects would have to be delayed if we take this up, because we have some really, really important projects already on the work list, and some of them have been waiting a long time to be done, and you know, I feel like at this point to jump a new project in takes us off task for some other things. So
Not sure if you can ask it, only because I don't think they've really processed the motion fully. But they're kind of chatting over there, so we'll see. Are you guys chatting about what projects might have to be sidelined, or is that a premature question?
Part of my job is to anticipate the premature questions. We would likely have to just contract this out. And so it would probably not be what work doesn't get done on a project, but we would have to find an additional, Matt's thinking about $50,000, because we wouldn't have the staff to just literally drop everything. So that's what, if the motion passes.
You also want this, I think maybe want the specialty too of getting.
Right. I mean, you know, to do this anywhere close to correctly, we would need someone who's really good at this.
Or to do the feasibility. Councilmember DiMichele?
yeah, just to conclude, I do want to say that I appreciate the thought about this, and that the community has been waiting, and of course, safety is of prime importance. I just think if we had a longer timeline, maybe I would be more likely to say, let's do this, but I just don't think we can ask the administration to come back in a month with a really good plan, and then we won't make summer, and, you know, so I think at this point I can't support the motion.
We have had 4 council members weigh in. Do the other 3 want a chance before we call for the vote on the motion? Not seeing any microphones. I think the motion is in an email, correct?
Can I ask a question? Sure. Do we have a sense when the 2023 overlay is planned to happen? Or something that we could use? Because the May 15th date came from the administration. I'm not tied to that. I'm open to other things that would allow it to work within that timeframe.
So we're in progress right now.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. I'm Emily
welcome.
Moon, Public Works Director. We're in the midst of developing the schedule for the whole pavement management program for this summer, fall. So that would be my answer at this point in time, sometime this summer or fall.
And again, we put in discussions with you earlier today, your desire was to have this in place this summer. And so we tried to come up with a date. Anything later would not be feasible. Because that's the second meeting in May, then you're dark then for a few weeks.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, let me find the motion, or I'll have the clerk read the motion back in to the record.
Yes. Direct the administration to return to the City Council at the May 15 regular meeting with feasibility, cost estimates, and other considerations for a temporary protected bike lane on Northwest Sammamish Road.
All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 I have 2 ayes. All those opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
And 5 opposed. So the motion fails 2-5. The next item of business this evening is committee and regional reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Joe.
No report, thank you. All my meetings have been canceled or moved at this point, thank you.
Wow. Councilmember DiMichele.
Thank you, Mayor Pauley. I have to find my comments here.
Do you want me to move to Councilmember Hunt?
No,
Or
I
you
just
did?
found them.
Okay.
That's okay. So at the Eastside Human Services Forum on April 13th, I was elected chair of the board. So there we are. Yay. We spent 2 hours participating in a strategic planning process at our last meeting. I would like to also invite you to an online event tomorrow that's being sponsored by the Eastside Human Services Forum. It's at 5:30 p.m. and the title is Reproductive Health Access in East King County, featuring King County Councilmember Sarah Perry, representatives from Pro-Choice Washington, Cedar River Clinics, and healthcare professionals. If you'd like to learn more, just go to the Eastside Human Services Forum website and you can register for that event. On Friday, April 14th, I attended the Eastside Transportation Partnership. Sound Transit CEO Julia Tim introduced herself and provided an overview of the organization's status, including a lengthy discussion regarding the replacement of over 5,500 substandard rail ties, or plinths, love that word, currently the replacement of which is currently underway. And I sent you the materials from that meeting and a link to the Seattle Times article about why those are all being replaced. So I thought that the Seattle Times article was especially informative. And then finally, Wednesday, we will have the Regional Transit Committee on April the 19th and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you. That ends my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunt?
No report this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray?
No report this evening.
Wow. Councilmember Mertz?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee met on Wednesday, April 12th, in Brenton City Hall for the first time since COVID. We all looked very, very old. So that must have been a trick of the light, certainly. But it was good to get everybody together. We didn't take any action. We did. I apologize. I can't find my notes. The upcoming the renewal of the veterans, children and
Veteran and Seniors Levy?
veteran and seniors and families, I think, is the third element. There was a conversation about that. There really wasn't any action that could be taken. There was, it's a basically 1-for-1, unlike the one 5 years ago, which represented a discontinuous increase in the fee in terms of the mill rate. This is a replacement mill rate. So we were, I think we asked for some supplemental information that we could share. So if I get additional information on it, if I can share with the council, I will do that. And tragically, the Services, Safety and Parks Committee is not meeting this month. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Mertz. Deputy Council President Hall?
Thank you. Yeah, I watched the SCA PIC meeting over Zoom as the city's alternate. It looked very jovial in the room, Councilor Martz, so I was bummed to be watching it on Zoom webinar. No report other than to say that the next Eastside Fire and Rescue Board of Directors meeting is May 11th at 4 p.m. at our headquarters on Newport Way Northwest. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Walsh?
Thank you. On April 6th, I attended the Growth Management Planning Board. We voted to certify the Kitsap countywide planning policies, and we also heard about the proposed comprehensive plan certification outreach for King County. And then the Affordable Housing Committee will meet on May 1st, and no agenda has been released. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Council President. Next item on tonight's agenda is the mayor's report. So first off, there will not be an executive session this evening. And beginning this week, 5 of the city's advisory boards will transition from using the virtual meeting platform WebEx to Microsoft Teams. This is the Environment Board, Equity Board, Human Services Commission, Park Board, and Transportation Advisory Board. Other boards and commissions may add a virtual attendance option via Teams for certain meetings, and these meetings will also all continue to have an in-person meeting location. Any meeting that has virtual attendance option will include the virtual meeting details at the top of the published meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the website calendar. So to help ensure you can join one of these meetings virtually, please consider downloading the Microsoft Teams app in advance and log into the virtual meeting 10 minutes early. The City Council, Development Commission, and Planning Policy Commission will continue using WebEx webinar for the virtual aspect of their meetings. We are now seeking nominations. They are open for the Issaquah Hall of Fame Award. This is a top honor for an individual making a lasting contribution to our community. Each year, the mayor and council president select a person to induct into the Issaquah Hall of Fame for their exemplary record of inspiration, leadership, and service. The award will be presented at the Chamber of Commerce's annual Issaquah Community Awards event on May 24th, and the nominations can be submitted at issaquahwa.gov/nominate. The deadline for nominations is 5 p.m. April 28th. We are so pleased to see the community filling Pickering Barn this Sunday on a very rainy day. Our staff hosted a sustainability fair with nearly 40 vendors, including local businesses, artists, and organizations. Walking through the dairy barn, visitors could set up an appointment with a heat pump installer, try out the salmon catapult, pick up a fresh jar of honey or vegan treats, play in a game about waste reduction, or purchase used clothing from Small Threads. In the hay barn, the Gibson Neck High School interns set up activities for kids to think about green building and climate resilience, while a band played music about climate change and environmental activism. Outside the barn, we had 18 people join our urban forest supervisor for a mini field trip, where they visited a restoration site and watched eagles soaring above. In the parking lot, the out-of-the-box eco van refilled hand soaps and shampoos, while Public Works and Recology helped kids and adults into the driver's seats of pollution prevention trucks and Recology's new EV waste hauler truck. Our volunteers counted nearly 700 community members that visited the fair. Our staff are already preparing how to make next year's fair better, and we're excited to have this event join our regular rotation for events that the city hosts. And I did see some council members there, so thank you very much for coming and sharing your time with the community. Some upcoming events. April 20th to 22nd is the last night of Ramadan, and I'm going to not say this right, so correct me. Eid al-Fitr. Eid al-Fitr. Thank you, Council President. April 22 is the State Park Free Pass Day, and April 25th is the Election Day. Ballots are being mailed, drop boxes are open, and the April 25th Election Day approaches. You can also visit the King County Elections drop box at our own Issaquah City Hall at 130 East Sunset Way until 8 p.m. April 25th, the date of the general election. And that concludes the mayor's report. One of the last items on our agenda this evening is an informational update. It's ID 1424, the Issaquah Police Department 2022 crime statistics. And I'd like to invite Police Chief Paula Schwann to make a presentation. And as a reminder, there is no action or direction being sought on this item. The presentation is informational only. Chief, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to see all council members and Madam Mayor all here at the same in person. So I'm excited and thank you. I'll make it quick. I know we're late on the evening. So today I'm going to, as the mayor said, I'm going to give you, we had initially last year gave a quarterly or half year report, and we're going to give a full year of 2022 of what's taken place. And so this is all in 22 activities and crime statistics. Please, next slide. The data presented this evening is a presentation available that will be on the police department's 22 biannual end of year report, which is available on our website. The website is at issaquah.gov/police. And this document gives data closing out 2022, but you or the public are interested in more recent data, you're able to also have access to that on our monthly reports and updates on our regular website as well. Next slide, please. Overall, crime trends are relatively low in the city of Issaquah in 2022, with roughly 70 crimes per 1,000 population. Majority of our crime comes from property crimes, with nearly 80% of all crime in the city of Issaquah falling into the crimes against property category, with 2,193 incidents out of the total 2,791 incidents. When we compare these crimes categories over the last few years, most of the categories remained stable, while crimes against property steadily increased. Much of this is related to larceny thefts and trespasses, but these go hand in hand, so to speak. Next slide, please. Overall crime trends with year to date. Thus far in 2023, property crimes still hold the majority share of crimes in Issaquah. However, property crimes are finally starting to decrease. We believe this is in part related to the increased partnerships with local businesses and our increased directed patrol missions. For example, last month, IPD partnered with Target on a directed patrol mission and made multiple arrests and recovered over $2,000 in merchandise. These kinds of activities are having a direct impact on the estimates themselves. Next slide, please. In 2022, the overall crime trends and the bulk of the crime incidents per se were comprised of larceny and thefts, which is predominantly shoplifting, followed by trespasses, most for the shoplifting themselves, but also for unwanted subjects, and vandalism. The fourth highest category was burglaries, of which the majority are classified as commercial burglaries, not residential burglaries. And then there's a graphic there. It's probably hard to see a little bit, but the ones that are highlighted, and again, you'll have this report as well, or you have access to it, is the larceny and theft offenses, vandalism, and the trespasses. Next slide, please. In 2022, there were 49,319 total calls for service to the Issaquah Dispatch Center, and that's between March and December. There's 2 months that were uncategorized, and that was January and February of 2022, which we believe are approximately 10,000 calls for service, which is consistent with past years. Dispatch Center, with over 30,000 of those calls, or 62.1%, were for the Issaquah residents alone. Please note, this is not the full year. Like I said, the 2 months of data that are missing, we estimate those as 10,000, but this actually raises the total number of the calls to nearly 60,000 calls for service, which is in line with the prior years as well. Next slide, please. Total calls by emergency, while on average, there are around 60,000 calls for service to the Issaquah Dispatch Center. The proportion of calls has shifted over time. Most interestingly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, our proportional share of 911 emergency to non-emergency calls shifted. And it's been a drastic number and difference, and it used to be higher levels. If you can go to the next slide, I can get. It's important to note the overall trend decrease from 2019 forward is due to the missing estimates, but while on average there are the 60,000 calls of service to the dispatch center, the proportion of calls shifted over time, most interesting during COVID, and our calls for service went from over 50% of majority as non-emergency calls pre-COVID to post-COVID. In 2014, 54% of our calls were non-emergency, and then they moved and peaked in 2016 to 55.1. They were all classified as non-emergency. However, mid-2020, this shifted, and in 2022, the exact proportions switched, so that 54% of calls for service in our dispatch center are now 911 emergency calls. So there's been a complete shift in that. The volume has changed over, so we believe the proportions exact opposite and are growing, but is due to the population change is a big factor, and that's the biggest part of it. The gap has continued to widen. We believe in part, as I said, it was well to the population. Well, more people comes more calls for service. Next slide, please. Citizen-initiated calls has remained relatively stable. Officer-initiated calls has substantially decreased following the COVID-19 pandemic. This is due to COVID-19 guidance and fluctuating staff levels during the pandemic. We're going to monitor and keep track of these and how this will change as the limitations have lifted in 2023 and our staffing levels are beginning to rise. Due to how the data comes in, all calls online reports that go directly to our station officer are omitted from the analysis. In 2022, 36% of all calls were handled by the station officer themselves, and that's a lot. And those are the ones that come in online because of the online service and online reporting that we have, which are usually only cold calls, and we only recommend and direct them to the online service. If anybody has anything in progress or something that's not cold per se, then we have the officers respond directly. Next slide, please. Last year in 2022, we had behavioral health referrals. The city strives to be a healthy community where every person is considered essential. And meeting these basic human needs are considered a shared responsibility. IPD has been working with the City of Issaquah's Human Services team to refer cases where individuals need behavioral health assistance or other additional resources that the police department cannot provide directly. In 2022, 67 of the 161 total unique individuals served by the Human Services Behavioral Health and Homeless Outreach Program were referred by the IPD officers, and the people they came in contact with or were down in our jail for services, both on the street, and they didn't have to be incarcerated for us to have referrals with them. This represents 42% of the total cases. Thanks to this team, multiple lives have been enhanced by receiving access to supportive resources between the IPD and behavioral health. Yes.
I'll just break in real quickly. I was in a meeting of the Eastside Interfaith Council last week, and people from various cities were sharing, that they had behavioral health specialists. And so I jumped in and said, well, Issaquah does too. I want you to know that several people talked about how much they respect and love Amir and Caitlin. So it was really, nobody else said anything about anybody else's behavioral health specialists. But our two are really, really loved across the region. So I wanted you to know that.
Appreciate that. Yes, they work very well with our officers and very closely with them too. They appreciate the work that they do. It's been a great collaboration, for sure. Next slide, please. It is common practice for police departments to classify calls based on priority levels. All calls are responded to, but not all require the same type of response. If we took a look at all the calls, it took roughly 14 minutes to respond for regular non-emergency calls, but those are not all, as I said, emergency calls are different from non-emergency. In 2022, our average response time for the priority 1 emergency calls was 5 minutes and 27 seconds, but in reality is actually closer to 4 minutes. We're working on continued data cleaning for our system because some of our system was basically reporting when the last officer were to respond, and sometimes they're not even responding priority, so that separated some of that gap, and that's not an actual reality of our time, and that's why we say it's 4 minutes versus the 5:27. So we're working on our systems to get better for actual times. So just that gives you a little bit of a background and understanding of that piece. Next slide, please. The Issaquah City Jail update. Issaquah City Jail contracts services for over 14 other jurisdictions in our area. In 2022, there were 1,401 total inmates in the Issaquah Jail, with an average daily inmate population of at least 43.4 inmates. There were many days when we had near 60 or over inmates, and this is increasing. Of these, roughly 73 were male, 23 were female, and the proportion in line with other correctional facilities. Also, I can tell you that we have a 51 population in there today, and in the last 2 months, we've been at full capacity on more than one occasion, especially on the weekends. So it's been above average even for the first quarter of this year. Next slide, please. In 2022, the majority, or 63% of inmates, were between the ages of 25 to 44. This is typical of most correctional facilities. A handful of the cases were listed as under the age of 18. These cases were where the age is unknown and the juvenile, typically 16 to 17, does not identify their age. In 100% of these cases, within a couple hours or less, the juvenile is transferred to parental care to appropriate county juvenile care. By race, ethnicity, the majority, or 67% of the inmates identified as white. This is proportional with our population demographics. Next slide, please. In 2022, we had some highlighted awards. It's a high-level view of the 2023 organizational structure. This is the high-level structure first within the Issaquah Police Department. There are 2 civilian commanders positions and 1 sports services manager who maintain the daily services and operations of the police department. Any position listed in red is considered vacant, and any position in green was vacant but now has someone in the position and is presently training before being put into the field on their own. This was the 22, so we do have some of those spots filled now in 2023. This was just for through the end of the year. Next slide, please. While all our staff go above and beyond for our community, several of our members received awards in recognition for their efforts. There were numerous memorandums of appreciation and several commendations for continued service issued to various officers and civilian staff members. There were also a few awards of distinction that should be highlighted. Lifesaver Awards on October 7th, 2022. Correctional officers Grace, Fanchier, and Cruiswick were alerted to a life-threatening situation where an inmate was found in their dorm lying unconscious and unresponsive. The officers checked for and found a weak pulse. Based on this, the other symptoms present, the officers swiftly called for aid and administered Narcan, which is those who aren't aware, that's a drug that combats narcotic to bring someone back from an overdose. The inmate responded and was subsequently transported to the hospital for treatment and made a full recovery. The quick and decisive action of the following officers saved the inmate's life. Next slide, please. Meritorious Service Award. In September of 2021, the IPD Dispatch Center went through some incredibly difficult times, to include losing all but 3 dispatchers. Dispatcher Tricia Belize was then promoted to dispatch supervisor and tasked with rebuilding our dispatch center workforce while improving dispatch-related services throughout Issaquah, Snoqualmie, and North Bend cities. Throughout this process, Tricia worked tirelessly to not only rebuild staffing, but also took additional shifts to field 911 emergency calls for our region's residents. Next slide. Highlighted word of distinction was that there is a Battle of the Badges is what it's called, and many, many different agencies participate. This was our first year participating in the Battle of the Badges, and we, in December, completed the holiday display. They did, there was many people that contributed to it. They dressed up. People came by. They thought our gifts were great. They liked the music, and that we had the Grinch being arrested and the patrol cars there. And so they ended up subsequently winning and getting all the votes for people that go through. There were lines and lines of cars. It's kind of like trunk-or-treaters during the holidays for Halloween. This is the one in December. And so we were very honored to have taken first place in that this year. So that was a great highlight to the end of the year. Next slide, please. Moving forward in 2023, we focus on filling the positions. April 28th, 2023, we're interviewing potential candidates for both commanders' positions. We did have some great candidates, and we're looking forward to that testing process. Increasing directed patrol missions in the community business regions to target shoplifting-related crimes. And by the end of 2023, begin reopening of various community-oriented specialty programs and assignments. I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Through the presentation?
I'm sorry?
Are we through the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. It was awesome. Would you introduce your staff that you have here as well?
I have brought Ms. Ryan Smith, who put the presentation together and has collected all our data. She's been an amazing addition to our staff also in 2022.
Welcome, Ryan.
She's our crime analyst.
She's a crime analyst. Councilmember Mertz.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Can you go back to slide 3, overall crime trends year to date? One down. Sorry, that's slide 2. Slide 3, year to date. Whoop, other way. One more. There we go. All right, so this is through the end of March. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right, so crimes against persons. Can I assume that if it's at 50 at the end of March, the extrapolation of that would be 200 by the end of the year?
Looking at the numbers, quite possibly.
So that would be, going back one slide, that would be a substantial increase over the last few years, about a 60% increase. So do we know what that's coming from?
I would say that I'll let Ryan can speak to that possibly, but based on my being in the police department, we've had multiple robberies and a shooting, and there's been multiple different crimes that have taken place that has been an increase comparatively to past years.
Okay, so the trend is real, but is there, you said there's been robberies, there was a shooting, but is there, if you were to look at those 50 incidents, I mean, I think I hear you saying robbery is on the increase, but is there other, like if we were to look at those, you know, crimes by year and the trend lines, the way you had over the multi-years selected larceny and theft offenses, vandalism, trespass, if we looked at this spike that we're seeing, what looks like a spike for the first quarter of 2023, could we draw similar conclusions on which particular crimes appear to be occurring more often in the city, or is there not yet enough data to understand that?
You come on up, Brian.
So sorry, if I can just make a comment on that. The bulk of our estimates for the crimes against persons are primarily made up of simple assaults. And there is some seasonality to that. So at this point in time, we can't definitively say what the increase will be, although based on previous years, there will likely be an increase in that. But that is mostly due to simple assaults.
Okay, because yeah, if there was seasonality in the 2021 and 2022 data, it's still twice.
Yes.
Twice those. Okay. All right, thanks. I really wanted to just draw an emphasis to that and understand. And I don't know if down the road, if there's a conversation on additional things that, if why there's more simple assaults and what we can do in response to that. I mean, I think that we've all understood the rise in property crime, and I think that there's a perception, you know, in the community, property crime is property crime, but crimes against people is a whole different thing.
Chief, could I get you to expand to some of the incidents that you were mentioning were potentially assaults on individuals related to the organized crime, retail crime? Is that a factor in this number of 50?
Yes, it can be part of that factor as well. Okay. So there's been certain circumstances where there's been a shoplift that's taken place, for example, and we have citizens that are attempting to stop those individuals, and there's been assaults that has occurred in that process, which doesn't make it a robbery, but then it can, depending on the circumstance of them attempting to flee and it's the totality of the circumstance. But yes, those can have increased because citizens are fed up as well of the taking place. They're standing in line to pay for things and people are taking off, and so they want to interject. And so for their own safety, I don't recommend that. I recommend them being a great witness and explaining the direction of travel and what they can tell about the vehicle and that sort of thing. But that has been part of it.
Yeah.
And I know that you've
Thank you for that.
speaking on different parts.
Please tell people not to do that. We have seen a reduction in the amount of thefts in the organized retail category very slightly. So we will be having a meeting with Senator Murray for a proposal where I asked her to fully fund the Attorney General's organized retail task force because it's unlikely the legislature will fully fund them. So we've been meeting this week and I'm pushing really hard to get everything the Attorney General asked for because there is still a very high level of organized retail crime in Issaquah, and our residents see it and our residents try and stop it. And so we're not in the best place that we should be right now.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. And do we, you know, in the same way that we have outreach to the public and say, like, don't leave expensive things sitting in the passenger seat of your car, you know, those sorts of things. Are we doing that, or can we do that same outreach to discourage people from, you know, becoming a statistic in a crime statistic while they're trying to help?
That is great. I'm going to defer to the chief to look into that and see what other jurisdictions are doing. There's some great information out there right now from the Washington Retailers Association, how retailers should respond and tell their staff to protect themselves first and not to try to detain people. I'm not sure about public messaging, so that's probably something we can look into. I tell everybody I see not to intervene. I tell everybody that comes up and tells me that they tried to intervene that I wish they would not do that kind of thing.
Should they take pictures?
as long as it doesn't get them in trouble. Some people can get in trouble for taking, some people could get assaulted for taking pictures.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
But like a recommendation, for instance, if we think that that's a bad idea,
Yeah.
I mean, I could imagine being in that situation and considering, like, should I take a picture? Should I not take
Yep.
a picture? And really wanting to get whatever the best advice is. I think the whole thing about not leaving expensive stuff out in your cars has been really good
Yep.
and well communicated advice. And if there's other things we can do
That's a
to
good point.
help lower, for people not to become a statistic, that would be good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That is great. I'm looking, Councilmember DiMichele.
Thanks. So last week, I got to hear a presentation from the Seattle office of the Drug Enforcement Agency. And, the special agent was talking about how fentanyl is flooding Washington State. I'm sure you're well aware of that. Where do we see those statistics, reported? And are they reported as a crime in Issaquah, or are they reported as a crime against society, the gray on that chart? So how are drugs incidents reported, and do you separate out trafficking from possession, and can you just explain all of that?
That's a very large, broad question. So just to be in possession of it for personal use is not against the law. If someone overdoses, and we are seeing a massive increase, there's a lot fewer detection dogs for fentanyl. We have to get someone typically from customs that actually is someone when we have them, because they do searches, random searches of our jail. And so it's not the norm because it is very dangerous. And so there has to have special training as well. But as far as that would be a crime against society, it wouldn't be a crime against a person, especially being with the new laws and it being not quite, or no longer illegal to have personal possession of it. There is a new bill that's trying to be passed overall in the state they're working on to where that would put a stop to some of that, to where it used to be you have to have so many referrals if you did have a possession, and that's what was put into place over a year ago. The new bill is looking at where you don't have to have those anymore. And so that's going to the Senate, and we're waiting to see what happens in that process. But that would be, yes, in the gray area that you were speaking of.
Thank you.
Just one more clarification as well. While the court is not under the chief, we do have a community court where the jail and police are able to recommend individuals who have the potential to accept treatment options to be able to defer their jail time and not serve it, and to have it charges dropped after. So that community court is currently funded through July of this year, and we have a request into the state to continue the funding. We're very optimistic it's going to come, but that is one of our best ways to help people that need help, that are willing to take help. Councilmember Joe.
Thank you. Chief, thank you for this presentation. It's been great to get real numbers and to see them put out in graph form so that we can really get a hold of where we're going with crime. I had a question about the community resource officer positions that are vacant. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the distinction between a school resource officer, which we used to have in the old days, and the resource officer, and how they kind of change, the roles are a little bit changed and how they kind of do cross over a little bit. And then how, the second question to talk about a little bit is how we are keeping our schools safe from gun violence as we look at the school district going to a security system of their own, and then how the police department interacts with that system to keep our students safe.
Okay. So the first part of your question, difference between the SRO and the CRO. Community resource officers were in place when we had the CRO, or the SROs as well. And it wasn't that long ago. It was last year we had SROs. So it's newly, yes, but we do have the CROs, and we're going to now be having a second CRO. Hopefully they'll be in place by year's end as we get more people graduated from the academy. And those community resource officers. They work with all the businesses, they work with the community members. Officer Corporal Smith was one that many of you knew very well, has moved on to different things, and he was a community resource officer. He worked with Salmon Days, he worked with the Paws on Patrol, he did all those different programmings, and that's what our CROs are going to be doing. Now, the difference in that we're going to have two, they're still going to have more work to do, but they will also be in collaboration, and moves into, I guess, the answer to your second part of the question is how are we working with the new security systems and such in the school districts. The CRO and our officers currently, just because they don't have the title of CRO, they're doing that work now. They're working with communities, updating emergency contact lists. They're working with our community members now to make sure they're working on the 4th of July stuff. They're working on the Salmon Days stuff already, working on those different pieces that are out in the community and getting those programs ready to be started again in the fall. And so that's what the community resource officers do. We've also had meetings with the superintendents. We've met with Rachel, our city attorney, has also met with the school district and myself. I know that the city administrators worked with the school superintendent, and we've had a lot of communication with the security officers themselves and this people in charge of the security programs that are there. We work collaboratively very well. They communicate with us, we're communicating with them. If they have some incident or threat or possibility of an incident, we're making sure we have people present. So just because we don't have someone that's stationed there, we are working very closely with them to make sure that our students and our schools are very safe. And that hasn't been delayed in any way, shape, or form. We've also have a program to where in the event of an active shooter situation that we have access to the school very quickly, and that we've had a collaboration between not just us, but also Eastside Fire. So we are all working very closely and together, making sure that there is not a misstep in that, it's just a new way of doing business.
Thank you for that answer to my convoluted question. I appreciate that. The last thing I wanted to ask about was the legislation going through this current session talking about police pursuits, and if it does go through, how will our citizens see a little bit of a difference in terms of community safety? Thank you.
That's a very difficult subject. They did change to where the new one, it's minimal change, but reasonable suspicion is moved back in for certain different things in the new verbiage of the new, if it does pass. So that will be helpful, and that is part of the difference, is that if we have reasonable suspicion versus probable cause, which is a drastic difference in the two things. Where before we needed someone to say that that's definitively the person, I saw them do X, Y, and Z. That doesn't change the possession of stolen vehicle piece to it. So there will be changes, though, as far as us being able to stop or pursue in the event when we do have reasonable suspicion that it is that vehicle. So we're hoping to see less vehicles fleeing in the community, but we're also able to pursue in certain circumstances. But still, that doesn't deal, and I hope everybody has an understanding that that doesn't mean property crimes are going to be ones that we can pursue for, because that will not be part of this bill.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Any other questions on the presentation? Well, Chief and Ryan, thank you very much. That was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
And thanks for staying through our meeting. The last item, the next item of business is good of the order. And so I'll look to see if any council president, and anyone else has something to share.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up, I raised the issue of public comment summaries at our last Good of the Order session. This practice started at the beginning of the pandemic as we shut down all of our in-person meetings and went virtual. And since then, we've not only opened up our public meetings again, but we've continued providing the virtual attendance options. So we've really made it easier now than ever for community members to have their voices heard. So given that and the mayor's recent lifting of the emergency proclamation, we felt this was a good time to revisit our public comment practices. So I've heard back from all of the council members, and we've decided to discontinue the practice of having the council president summarize emailed public comments during our meeting. But as always, we welcome community members to continue sending in those emails or choosing to comment at our meetings either in person or virtually We read them all, we hear them all. We're just not making a second opportunity to summarize them at the meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Any others? I have a couple of meeting notices. Monday, April 24th is the Council Committee of the Whole, and the anticipated items will be much lighter this time. The Affordable Housing and Housing Action Plan and Implementation Grant. Just kidding, not lighter. Heavy, complicated, very, very big stuff. Also, the Police Court and City Hall planning future options. On Monday, May 1st, I was kidding, really kidding. Monday, May 1st, City Council meeting, the anticipated agenda items include the Title 18 Land Use Code adoption and an amendment to the City Council rules with respect to remote attendance. There is no executive session this evening, so we are adjourned at 9, let's call it 9:59. You have the gavel.